paying for the actual visit and the institutions were responsible for travel, but that it could work either through a reimbursement or we pay up front. Is there a preference one way or the other? Because we've received contact from our
Yeah,
reviewer.
my understanding is the way we wrote the contract is they're gonna invoice TBR and we're gonna do we'll send it to your campus for payment.
Okay, so we can direct the reviewer to TBR.
Yeah,
Okay, he's
Yeah.
reached out charging this already.
yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay.
A little bit that I understand, this sounds like a really helpful thing that the
Mhm.
system office is doing for us.
Good. I haven't had a single financial aid director complain, so I figured I was headed down the right path. If that was the case, so. Okay, good. And then our hope, I know there's not any TCATs in here, but just for the benefit of the group, our hope is that we will look at also how we're going to start doing reviews for the TCAT. So it won't just be community colleges, but we obviously are still trying to get a handle on the shared service piece right now before we can do that. So. Okay, so we're just waiting now for our second speaker, college scheduler. You'll have a few minutes to do whatever you need. There's bathrooms right outside this door if you need to.
Ask y'all a question. It'll be interesting to see since you're newer to the system, so dual credit types of activities. We are too. Conversation is now happening.
It is currently being transferred. Yeah. So we have that information.
And Marcia Pickle is our interim VP. I think it's really out in I was in our early college program that we started a couple of years ago. Dual credit opportunities into students 4 years of high school. Marcia and the faculty basically don't want to do that. And I understand some of their concerns. Charging students and all.
Roads, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I know it's a mixed bag across the state.
There is a real mix.
We don't, and I continue to stand on the side on charging high school students for people.
We don't.
Marcia doesn't agree with that.
It's the sheer, yeah, I noticed that too. Yeah, it's like
And that's
used
the
to
same
grind.
line, that's common. It's a. That's why I'm currently looking
Because it's important. And I understand that it costs us money,
Absolutely.
but it's, my reason for not charging is state level. We all understand everybody passes the state level. But that's their opportunity. For our gen ed faculty to have some relationship with their high school counterparts 1 or 2 times a year to talk about curriculum and stuff. That battle, but that's my personal feeling about that. But then you get into administering test is not a big deal. Grading test is a much bigger deal. We're moving a lot of that stuff into pushback we're getting though is some faculty, probably in some of the gen ed areas. Give just multiple choice history tests for our collegiate level. Assessment then goes to a proctor of the test, however that needs to be done. The academic people should grade it just like they grade any test. And then it gets into a thing that we have to pay them, and if you gotta pay them, then you gotta. I am not in favor of charging every student at the point that they take. I just think high schools are too many students.
She's in Texas.
Hi, how are you doing?
And I'm not opposed to doing that. I'm just saying.
I see the commission cost
Cost of draft.
and so we propose a
So I need to know, like, what level are we all thinking?
Sure.
So I'll remind people to go back into that dialogue.
And so, I'm still getting used to being and I know that I think that's realized. I think every institution is, and representatives of each institution.
I know. I think something to wake me up though.
Oh, hold on now.
Your other issues that
Please.
So the charter should be.
folks left, somebody who was a retired faculty.
I bet it is.
Who had
How
done
far? 2 minutes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You failed the term.
Yeah.
The traffic was bad today. It took me a long time.
It was.
Where's the?
We're gonna pitch it.
On the road longer.
You should have presenter rights.
I know.
So you're.
I mean, I'm almost, I mean, even, no,
Remind us to add.
never still.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much. It did not.
Okay.
I'll keep your cell phone number.
Yeah, that's what I meant more than anything, yeah. This probably
I think we got a better job.
It was just, that's why we have you all.
Yeah.
See, that was like, I had that one on, but we're definitely gonna put that.
All right, we're ready to start our 1:30 presentation. Andrew, are you on the call?
I am. Can everyone hear me okay?
We can. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you so you can get started.
Excellent. Can everyone see my screen at the moment?
Yes.
Excellent. That's the first step. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Dubo. I am the account executive for Tennessee College Scheduler by Civitas Learning. And today I want to give you an overview of our services and give you a quick rundown of the relationship that we recently struck with Tennessee Board of Regents. If you have any questions as we're going through, please don't hesitate to ask, and I am happy to answer any questions that you might have after this. Any questions before we get started?
I don't see anybody in the room.
Excellent. So just quickly, what does the TBR and College Scheduler agreement mean? The TBR team did a fantastic job, also for negotiating efficiency for the Tennessee Board of Regents institutions, streamlined procurement process, so it's much easier to opt into working with college, continued partnership for a lot of the schools that we've worked with over the past 3 or 4 years. But some of you who are not with College Scheduler might be wondering who we are and what we do. So what College Scheduler does is we help students balance life inside and outside the classroom. Students can find schedules that work for them to keep them on plan, keep them on track while balancing everything that happens outside of the classroom, whether that's work, family responsibilities, or anything else that might come along. And we also help institutions make the most of their resources by better understanding what courses students want to take, when they can and can't take classes, and better understand the master schedule at institutions. So when students can't find schedules that work for them, the problems that arise are they take fewer courses, so taking 12 credits instead of 15, etc. This is increasing students' time to completion. They take fewer courses, so courses that don't satisfy requirements of their degree plan. This is a waste of resources for them and for institutions. Or they accept a less than optimal schedule. So if you're going from class or work to or class to athletics practice or whatever every day, you're setting yourself up for a stressful situation that can impact grades and overall satisfaction. Or students will take a semester off sometimes when they can't find a schedule that works. Chances are when they do, they're not coming back, or they're not coming back to your institution specifically. All of these things increase time to completion, and all of these things put students at a higher risk of non-persistence. And from an institutional perspective, a lot of work goes into planning the master schedule, and students still can't find classes that work for them or schedules that work for them. Sections fill up or never fill at all. Can't find schedules that work. This line represents going to the advising office or the registrar's office, panicking during registration, and this is inevitably when the president or the provost walks by and says, "What's happening over there?" Or we also see advisors spending a lot of their time helping students build schedules instead of having a higher level discussion about student goals, what they're trying to accomplish, other things they would like to pursue. And it really comes down to the old pen and paper method. How many folks in the room does this look familiar to who are not using scheduler at all? You start building out a schedule, and then you find the one section of English you need conflicts. You start over and over again. Even in the most modern student information systems, it's still a digital pen and paper situation. So what we do is provide conflict-free schedules for students that allow them to see all of the possibilities that are available while taking into account everything that's happening outside of the classroom. So students follow 4 easy steps to build schedules. They add courses, they add breaks. So this is anytime they can't take class, whether it's work, family responsibilities, athletics. Then they generate schedules, see all of the options that are available to them of open classes in their schedule. Then they send it to CART and they register in Banner, and they are done from there. Any questions about how that works so far? take that silence as a no. We also have administrative tools on the back end, so course demand reports, better understanding what courses students want to take next term. A great example is the University of North Dakota looked at their data and saw they knew they had 200 seats for English 101. They filled every term, but when they looked at their data from college, they saw that one term 298 students wanted to take English 101. They saw the next term 302 wanted to take it. And their reaction was, have we been knocking students off of their degree plan 98 to 102 at a time every term? And they were able to adjust their overall master schedule to offer more seats to keep students on plan. We also have the ability to preload breaks in courses. If you know students are following a particular regimented curriculum, you can preload those courses into their schedule. And when they go into College Scheduler, all they have to do is put in their breaks to find a schedule that works for them. We also have the ability to add breaks, which is the perfect example and the reason this started athletics, to be able to upload for all of your athletes so they're not scheduling classes at that time. That saves an immense amount of time for registrars across the board having to go in and do add drop forms as an example. But College Scheduler is not just a nice to have an enhanced student experience. We actually see that it has an impact on student outcomes. So we actually saw, using a pretty rigorous data science methodology, that students who use College Scheduler, actually across the board, students were able to take 1.3 more credit hours a term when College Scheduler was rolled out. Or said a different way, half of students were able to take an additional 3 credit course. We saw increases in persistence when students can find schedules that work for them. We saw overall students who use College Scheduler versus those who didn't saw a 2 percentage point increase in persistence. And for brand new students first time in college, it was actually a 4.95 percentage point increase. And then you can see the impact on degree completion as well. From a more anecdotal standpoint, our customers have told us that they see a 60% decrease in walk-in traffic to academic advising because students can actually find the schedule they want the first time around. There's less panic around the registration process, which a lot of people look at as a tradition these days, but there's no need for it to be that way. Tying into this, one of our customers in New York reported a 15% decrease in add drop forms because students could find the schedules that they wanted initially. We see a decrease in or effective advising experience because instead of taking 20 minutes of an advising session, advisors and students can plan out the next term, put together the classes that they need to take, and then use 2 minutes at the end to build a schedule that works for them. This is actually feedback that we got from the University of Memphis. I don't know if anyone is representing in the room, but they did an analysis after rolling out College Scheduler and saw students took 2.4 more credits per term than those who didn't use College Scheduler. And then this is feedback from real students. So it's crazy how good your software needs to be, especially around scheduling, for students to go on social media to talk about how good the experience was. But this shows you the type of impact that we have. And the fact that students tell each other about Scheduler makes me happy every time I look at it. And inspiring altruism on social media, I think, is something that we can all aspire to and makes us think we're doing good things over here. So that is a quick overview of the College Scheduler tool. In terms of next steps, if you don't already have College Scheduler, you can reach out to me. Again, my name is Andrew Dubo. This is my email address, and we can schedule an overview for your team, whoever would like to see it. We normally work with the registrar's office with advising student success and institutional effectiveness is a big contact for us these days as well. And then you can contact Angela Flynn at TBR, who can get you the proper participation agreement. We negotiated pricing for every school, every public school in Tennessee through this. So pricing is already established, and it's just a participation form from Angela to get things started. That's a very, very high level and very fast overview of College Scheduler. Does anyone have any questions for me while we're on the presentation?
Andrew, we had been previously implemented before the new contract, but we've had director level turnover at some key places that this would be used. Even though it would not be new training, is it still possible to schedule refresher training for those new staff?
Of course, yeah. Every one of our customers, a partnership manager. The training is available whenever you like. There's no additional fee for it, and we would be happy to set that up for you.
Thank you.
That's also a great point. Since we had a dozen partners in TBR before this RFP went out, and some of them over a very long period of time. So if we would like to schedule a review of new features that are available, we'd be happy to set that up as well. Adoption is a huge part of why our software is successful, and making sure that you have the newest, latest tools available is important to us.
How quickly can we adopt this?
The implementation, we say, takes 28 days. It's really about 9 hours. And it's like one person on your IT team would need to spend about 9 hours with us total. It's 3 calls, usually only 2. We keep 1 in reserve. And then a lot of time is actually spent making sure that things are called what you want called. But the implementation is painless, and we always seem to follow up with people right after they did like a DegreeWorks implementation, and it's nothing like that. It's very, very simple, and it's easy to get up and running. And something that's great is that since we already partner with so many schools in TBR, I would highly recommend you ask others about that experience.
So again, if you're online and you have any questions, you can use the chat box if you need to. We'll do a final call for questions.
Hi, this is Northeast State, and we're currently doing a month-to-month because we were hoping and anticipating that this would be a good price incentive for us. There were some issues with co-rec learning support with College Scheduler. Has some of that been resolved?
I would have to dig into the particular case, but the co-recs should be good. But we could definitely dig into it.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Definitely. And who is it from Northeast?
Jennifer Starling and Deidre Close from Northeast State.
Perfect. I will have our team reach out to you about that.
Thank you.
What other questions do we have?
Andrew, I don't see anybody else here in the room with questions, so I think we might be good for now.
All right. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to present today. I really appreciate the opportunity. I look forward to continuing the discussion both with our current customers in TBR and new ones to join later. So if there's anything you need from me, please let me know. And Northeast, I will follow up with you shortly.
Thank you.
Thanks. Those of you that are staying on for our meeting, give us just a minute as we switch our slide deck.
It was all over the place.
right. I am going to turn the meeting over to Brian.
All right. Hello, everybody, and hello on the calls. Who is with us for calls? I'm guessing Chattanooga. Okay, Mississippi.
Yes, I'm
And-
here, Leanne, too, though.
Hey, Leanne.
Brad's here from Chattanooga.
Hi, Brad.
Roan State should have someone on the call, is that correct? Robin? And do we have TCATs? Any TCATs on the call? Not yet.
We have one or two.
We probably need them for the minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if we have the two TCATs, tell us who they are for the minutes.
One's Stacy Livingston.
And the other.
Could our TCAT representatives identify themselves just for the purpose of minutes, please? Hello?
You're on the call. We have Stacy. Is there another TCAT?
Cherry Johnson at Crump.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's everyone, Heather, so far? Okay, just let us know if somebody gets added.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We're going to start with a couple policy action items. Policy 208-1000, development and operations of off-campus international education programs. This policy was only 38 pages. I assume everybody's ready to go line by line. And we'll just talk it out all the way through.
You're
so funny, Brian.
This is the third time you've had this policy in like a year, so you should be real familiar with it by now. It's just clarification language that needed to be added for accreditation purposes to make clear the relationship between TNSIS and your campus offerings. So that's the only addition there.
So I'll call for a motion to accept.
So moved.
Angie Smith, second.
Second.
Michael Stokes, any discussion? Discussion from the phone. All in favor? Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Policy 203-0004, technical college learning support. Ms. Hawkins. Hello and welcome.
No, the mics aren't working.
Oh.
Oh, that one is?
That one does.
Oh, you're special.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. How are we doing? Doing pretty good? It's okay to respond. Well, I wanted to know before I get started, do we have any TCATs on the phone? Because I don't think I see any. Two. Which schools do we have represented on the phone?
TCAT Livingston is here.
Livingston? How are you, Stacy?
Good, how are you?
Good. Well, I will go ahead and move forward with this policy. This is a policy that was newly established by the Tech Foundation's faculty back in the spring. It came before this group back in July. It came as a discussion item. And not only did it come before the student affairs, but it also went before academic affairs as well as the faculty subcouncil back during that time as well. But the purpose of this policy is to establish some parameters and clear definitions around what learning support or technology foundations is at our TCATs, as well as create some consistency across the delivery of tech foundations at each of those. So since the policy was established, we did have a revision that was recommended from one of our campuses related to the valid assessment of the scores. Initially, that was 5 years, and there was a revision to change that to 3 years. That was the only change that we've had since the establishment of the policy.
Stacy and Sherry, in scanning the room, I think we would all defer to you on a vote here since this policy impacts TCAS directly.
I move to pass the policy.
This is Chariot Crump. I second.
Okay. Any discussion in the room or on the phone? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Right, we have 2 items for review. Policy 201-0102, interinstitutional relationships and off-campus offerings. Dr. Penn.
Yes, sir. I have this on flash. Do you want to project the policy or?
I don't think it's needed. Everybody got a copy in their Trello folder, so I think we're okay. Yeah.
So policy 2010102, interinstitutional relationships and off-campus offerings. The changes that have been made to the initial policy with some definitions that have been added. And I direct your attention down to the section that talks about service area. This was presented to the Academic Affairs Subcouncil yesterday. It's a discussion item now, it's under discussion. There were some older documents that are no longer in effect that were referenced, the scope and profile document and the CEU document that comes out of THEC. Also, there were some gaps that govern how institutions work together for dual enrollment for schools that are requesting a relationship, a collaboration for dual enrollment. They're going to be, the Academic Affairs Subcouncil is going to be making revisions, suggestions, and edits and discussion virtually, where I've posted the document. I don't know, Chairman, how this body wants to engage with that as well for any kind of revision suggestions. I'm open for any recommendations that you have.
So we are in our review period. What this body has normally done is set a due date to return items and comments, and if we have either on campus or cross campus discussions between here and that due date, if that is satisfactory for you.
Yes, so would you like me to send you the current version of the policy that the academic affairs folks are looking at, and then you can collate the recommendations from this body and send it back? I'm asking the deadline that we've set for academic affairs is before Thanksgiving break.
Okay.
If that will meet your needs.
So Friday, November 22nd.
Yes, sir.
Is that the right? Is that the date you're working from?
Does that give your group enough time to read,
glance around and see? I see mostly head noddings. Concerns from anybody on the phone line about a November 22nd deadline for feedback on this policy? Hearing none, that seems to work, sir.
Any questions? And this will go before Academic Affairs Subcouncil as an action item in our January meeting.
Is the most current version on the Trello board?
Should be, so.
Actually, since we met yesterday, I made comments from the Academic Affairs Subcouncil, and that met yesterday. So I will send out the most current, because it has some notes and questions that they came up with that might spur conversation among you all.
Okay, we'll get it in Trello.
Thank you.
Any questions on the goal here for anybody, or are we good? Okay, so November 22nd, comments due back to Dr. Den. If there's any need for us to schedule a call in the meantime, we certainly can do so.
Thank you.
All right, and I understand you're gonna give a DEI update now?
Yes,
Okay.
and for that, I do have a card.
Okay.
So who is for Jeff?
What's best?
I'll take it.
Okay, I've been asked to give an update on the digital engagement initiative. And if you'll go to the first content slide, please. I'd like to remind folks of our mission. Provide all students complete access to the digital materials they need before day one of class at a substantially reduced cost. That was the mission. I don't know if you can see that, but some of the preliminary course outcomes, well, of course, we're interested in saving students money, but we also want them to do well in their classes. And preliminary results from the pilot showed that 2 of the 7 courses that were in the pilot, students did significantly better in the pilot group as compared to the control groups, which were the same sections of the same course that were using traditional print and other materials. And then 2 of the courses did equally as well, and 3 of the courses did more poorly. And before we make any conclusions on that, if you go to the next slide, please, we have to keep in mind as the group, the cohort groups that we're serving, and these are students who are low income, underprepared. And so right now, this is a preliminary data, and our Office of Policy and Research leader, Dr. Amy Moreland, who is leading the research component of this project, will have even greater data for us in January once those grades have post from the fall term. Next. So here's some takeaways. To remind you, in the pilot in the spring, we had approximately 5,000 course enrollments that were using inclusive access model. We jumped from 5,000 to 63,000 in one term. So the floodgates have opened. People are liking, the faculty are liking what they're saying, and we expect that to grow even more next year. The opt-out rate is about the national average, about 4.9%. You know, we have to allow students to opt out and to find the texts in any other form or from any retailer of their choice. We had about 4.9% of those students did that this fall. And we saved students over the retail cost of the corresponding print materials $5.7 million. So what's going to happen next? What I call DEI phase 2. And if you'll click the next one, we have creating a digital campus culture. It's what we're calling this next phase. Can you go to the next slide, please? Anybody seen this show? Great British baking show. They always talk about in their bakes creating layers. Okay, layers. So that's how we're going to build digital engagement initiative from term to term, is building on layers. Next.
We'd like to acknowledge Dr. Deaton's overwhelming enthusiasm for the Great British Baking Show for the minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Deaton.
So as you know, the dual enrollment students make up about 20% of our system-wide headcount, a very important segment of our student body. We want to see if we can push down the digital engagement initiative and start using digital materials more and more for our dual enrollment sections. And then we're trying to get some on the ground at each of our campuses of faculty members who will take leadership and take charge of expanding and strengthening the communications and the implementation on their campuses by providing them release time. And these are just some of the activities that they might be engaged in. Next. We heard from many professors that students they just don't have the device, they don't have the technology to engage with the digital materials. And so we're thinking now with the drop off in the cost of these devices, and on the right there is just the latest ad that came across a news feed about these devices that are now lower than $150, which might make it feasible to pilot a one-to-one model for students that might be issued a device when they register for certain sections that are using digital materials. And then our TCATs. The TCATs right now, their bookstores are mainly, they're operated independently. The community colleges are all now on a contract with Follett, which is our vendor for our bookstore, and they're the ones that provide what I call the vending machine model for inclusive access, that they can vend out or they can deliver any title, any digital material that exists to any of the professors' sections that sign up. But the TCATs didn't have that availability, but now they have the opportunity to sign on that contract, and some of them are doing so. You can see on the screen there over the next couple of terms, and they'll be able to participate in the inclusive access model. And then OER, that's the next big thing in higher ed. Open educational resources, if you're not familiar, these are usually resources that are developed by faculty members with expertise in the content, and they're open licensed. That means that they can share them, redistribute. Once the students and professors have them, they can retain them and do anything they want to with them. Mix it with other things, revise and update, and they're completely free. So free is even better than substantially reduced. And so that's the direction we want to go. And some of this is already happening at our community colleges. We already have professors who are creating materials that their students will use for free. And then other opportunities for faculty to do some interdisciplinary work, some interinstitutional work in developing these OERs. And that's all I have. Questions? One of the biggest challenges that we do see that might have implications for this group is the student communication piece. So we heard yesterday from Pellissippi, they're having trouble marketing and actually telling the students when they come on campus, what is Digital Engagement Initiative? What does it mean when you're getting digital materials? How do you use them? The opt-out feature, those kinds of things.
Questions, comments from the phones regarding DEI?
Did we work out the issue? Was there an issue with financial aid and ISBNs? Is that regarding this initiative?
We certainly had concerns at our campus about whether we were Title IV compliant. We worked with Follett to breathe deeply and feel like we could survive a federal review if we had been in the middle of one in this summer. We are continuing to make sure for ourselves that we are confident in our Title IV compliance.
Does anyone else have the issue of a student going to the bookstore to opt out and they're not having the book available?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we had books still not out 3 and 4 weeks in.
Yes. And then I know there was the discussion of deploying teams on campus to connect business offices, financial aid, and faculty. I can't underscore enough the importance of looking at how various policies intersect. Because we had the concern of purge, the fees already front-loaded onto students' account, and then having to, because we scaled at a rate this semester significantly sometimes without the student affairs and business office being integrated as much as we should have. And so we were forced at the last minute to try to figure out how to extrapolate those students who's were above the purge threshold because of DEI versus because of tuition and fees. So that communication has to be streamlined a whole lot more as we continue to scale. I don't know if anyone else had that problem.
We did at Northeast State and had to really work with the data and.
IT, yep, we did too.
So it just took a little extra time. We did not want to drop somebody.
Absolutely, and I don't know that we can, because when you look at, because I was pulling a lot of policies, and I pulled TBR's policy, I pulled Department of Education policy, and when you look at the definition of tuition and fees, which are mandatory fees as TBR, it's not DEI. So, you know, there are a lot of nuances that happen.
I met with the CFO, Danny Gibbs, and the deputy CIO, and we're going to plan a call with the business office and some of those folks involved in all of those policies, get everybody on the phone together to talk through some of these issues. So it's very salient point. Thank you.
Anybody else? Questions, comments? Thank you, Dr. Dean.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Our next review item, statement for accreditation for policy 2010100, academic program approval. Dr. Marion.
Thank you. First thing I want to comment on is I'm not sure what the statement of accreditation relates to the academic program approval policy. So if that needs clarification, that may be part of the input I'm asking for when I walk away from this. But it is the policy on academic program approval and the combination of what is now the AO10 guideline. So first I need to just simply make an apology. I pulled this policy from the other two subcouncils and failed to inform Dr. Lemming that I had done so. So what is out there was an initial stab at trying to do this, but there are just so many variables still to be addressed. And I'm going to list just a few of them that I thought of since I walked in here. So this policy is a total rewrite, reformatting. The idea is I want to move in the draft a lot of the significant data about the process to an exhibit at the end of the policy, a manual, so to speak, because this is more than the typical two-page exhibits. This will be a manual explaining the approval processes. I love the fact that when I met with Dr. Hamilton, that she tried to reassure me that I would live through this, the writing of this policy. We're in a new beginning now. And so that's what I'm asking you to, is we're in a new beginning. Some of the issues, for example, we want the community colleges to be able to expedite the approval process to whatever extent possible. So we know that SACS says the board has to approve all these changes, but it doesn't say how the board has to approve. And so we want to investigate, are there ways that we can expedite that even further than what we've already done? For most of you may not realize that 20 years ago, every single thing, including a name change, went to the board. So typically quarterly board meetings would have 60 to 70 items on the community college. And we've expedited it tremendously in 15 years. But for people that haven't been around more than 15 years, they don't realize that changes. So it's still, we've still got a lot of new technologies and new options there. THEC has revised their policy using a total different format. They're really using narratives now and checklists instead of forms. Our policy has to align with theirs. And there's now several policies at THEC that have to be reviewed, not just one. The Apolog launch, which will have libraries and easy access to all the curriculum and the courses that we aligned so far, will be launched the first week in November. We gave a demonstration for the academic officers yesterday, and we will show the faculty. The current policy says nothing about curriculum curriculum, alignment, the use of ACALOG, course review at the system level. Because if we're going to keep courses in alignment, it's not that the board has to approve your courses, but there's going to have to be some sort of review to ensure that we're not having 13 community colleges develop the same course and call it something different. So none of those things are currently addressed in the current policy and have to be addressed. We have another thing going on is the integration of curriculum forms for the institutions that have curriculum with the TBR forms. And one of the things that I've fully realized is that TBR's curriculum forms have to be revised. So we need to align the forms, revise our forms to simplify them. I'm loving the body language of yes, yes, yes. And then have some training and discuss what the best process is so that we write this procedure efficiently and effectively. That's my goal. So anyway, I've actually got more things here, but that's the idea. Now, the main thing I wanted to leave you with, to the best of my knowledge, I mean, this approval process, the information getting to you after it's approved, I know is critical. But what happens between the time the campus approves it and TBR approves it, the current process does not include, to my knowledge, you in that role. And maybe it should. So if there's something you're missing right now in getting the information you need that needs to be a part of this policy, then I need your input for sure. I'm open to input in other ways too, but that would be what directly impacts the people that you're working with in your role. So if you're missing something that you wished you had, please send me an email, let me know, and I'm open for questions at this point. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Berry, did you walk over? Dr. Berryman.
Yes.
Will this come back to us for action vote next quarter?
So basically what I'm saying is this is full, we're starting all over. So we start the process all over. Yes, you get it released, information item 3 months, then action item if it didn't work, another 3 months, and action.
Thank you. Oh, okay. We need to back up real quickly. We did not approve our minutes from our last meeting. Sorry. So you have minutes in Trello. Can I have a motion and a second to approve?
So moved. Second.
Jackie and Emily, were there any changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right, informational items, high impact practices. Dr. Lemon.
Okay, I'm going to move through these as quickly as I possibly can. Stop me if I go too fast or you have questions. A lot of this is the same information I presented in the summer, but we've had different people come into place since then, so I just want to make sure everybody knows what's going on. So this is our calendar of events for the year for the Gates grant. We have our Mindset Summit tomorrow. We are scheduled to do our regional drive-ins for the strategic enrollment management work on November 15th. Our high impact practice statewide conference in January, like we have done the last couple of years. Our advising academy, the date is March 9th through the 10th. It's been confirmed to be at the Franklin Marriott now. So if you want to get that on your calendar, that is the start of spring break week, not the end, but the start this year. We're going to do an institutional research academy, which will largely be your institutional research staff invited to that event on the 18th and 19th. And the Gateway Course Academy will primarily be, faculty who are working with those Gateway courses. So we won't be doing co-rec academies any longer. We're going to move now to looking at all Gateway courses. So that's our timeline for this year's activities. We do have funding that will take us through 2021. So you should anticipate that these same types of activities will occur the following year in about the same sequence.
Does the Advising Academy have a specific focus?
Sean's going to give a report on the Advising Academy as part of his report later today. Real quickly, there was a flyer that was produced, put into the Trello board, just offering services for our high impact practice specialist, Dr. Melinda Connor, she's in the back, wave your hand, to come to campuses and do professional development on high impact practices. We will pay for her travel to come to your campuses to do that. We know many of you have centers for teaching and learning, but not everyone has that. So if you don't have a venue by which you're doing professional development for faculty, Melinda is available to help do that this year. She's going to start doing monthly calls with the directors for the Centers for Teaching and Learning. We convened them this summer for the first time, and they requested that they have some kind of regular interaction together. And so she's going to start developing those monthly calls, and then we will continue to do the learning communities for co-requisite faculty, which I believe Melinda kicked off. It's going to kick off. It kicked off this week. Yeah. So if you've got questions about that, I mean, Melinda's certainly here and she can answer those, but I know largely that's more of your academic counterparts' roles, and so I just wanted to get you up to speed on what we're doing on that part. If anybody has questions, okay. The other piece is that we did post a position here at for the system office to have a competency-based instructional designer. The search is underway. They hope to have a candidate identified so that we can have someone in place by January of 2020. The idea would be that we would have somebody here that would develop a training for faculty to go through to get a certification in competency-based education instruction. And then they would go out on the campuses and serve as kind of that main point of contact for other faculty to, again, kind of scale this. We do have some interest, potentially, well, we know that there is interest to get some funding to also look at scaling this in bigger ways. And so it would include more permanent funding outside of the Gates grant, so long-term funding, as well as regionally based, competency-based instructors that would help faculty, and some stipends that we could give to faculty as they serve in that role on campus to help, again, scale competency-based education. So we're working in that space. You're going to hear more about that in the coming year. And then, of course, our strategic enrollment management work is funded by Gates as well. And I've identified, we've talked about this before, the outcomes that we're expecting to, or the deliverables that we're expecting to receive from that work, including communication plans and onboarding process maps that campuses produce, as well as identifying goals for their strategic planning work. We are starting the process of scheduling campus visits for January and February. The goal would be that those deliverables will be discussed as part of our system office visits with your senior team on campus first part of next year. Any questions about those items? We also are wrapping up our NASH TS3 pilot. Wanted to make sure that everybody knew this is our final semester. Again, Dr. Connor's been working with 5 schools on pathways, and we convened faculty from the other institutions in September to learn about that work and take ideas back home with them about how they could maybe embed high impact practices into those particular pathways at the other institutions. So you may hear some talk about that. We hope you hear some talk about that. The faculty who came were really energized about the work. We did get some feedback from them. There are some concerns that they might not have as much administrative support as they would like to do this work. So we've encouraged them to talk with administrative staff at their campuses about how they can take it to the next step. And then we are going to be creating those high impact practice data profiles by the end of this year for those pilot schools. Our goal would be ultimately that we'll do that for everyone, but we'll have a nice sample of from that pilot work that we can share out with others after December. And then for those of you in the registrar, that want to share this with your registrar staff, we have looked a lot more deeply at the high impact practice data. And one of the things that's kind of coming up as a mismatch is we get numbers from TNSIS about the number of students participating in TNSIS courses, and it's not matching with the number we're getting from the campuses. So it's clear to us that the campuses are not coding those students when they take a TNSIS course. That is the responsibility of the home institution to do that coding. So just because they're enrolled in a Tensis course, it doesn't, they have no way to go into your banner system to code that. So just remind your study abroad staff that when they have students participating in those Tensis courses, that we still need to code that in the banner system. So we would like to have a little bit more reliable data related to study abroad. We had a similar issue with undergraduate research. We had a grad assistant reach out to probably about 6 campuses and the faculty at those campuses who had courses that were coded as undergraduate research that raised a red flag to us. Like we didn't quite understand how it could be undergraduate research. I gave specific details of that to your chief academic officers yesterday. They've been asked to go back and talk with the registrars and the faculty members. Most of the faculty said, yes, it's been miscoded. There were a few that it was correct, but most of them said, no, it was miscoded. It does need to be removed from the course. Otherwise, it will keep rolling after each term. So, and we, again, want to emphasize that the minimum definition is that the student has to be working in collaboration with a faculty member. It has to be a unique contribution to the discipline. So it's not, I'm in English 1010 and I'm doing a research paper. That does not meet the minimum definition for undergraduate research. We saw a lot of that. So just as much as you all can reemphasize that point when you're working with your registrar staff to code, that would be helpful. And we just have some slides here to show you what our current participation trends are. About a third of our students are participating in at least one high impact practice, and you see there in the fall term, obviously more students largely because of the first year seminar course that many of them are required to take in the first term. You can see that as a system total, again, about a third of our students participating, and you can see some schools are above that, some a little below, but on average, that's about 32% participation rate. You'll get a copy of these slides, of course. And then by population, one of the things that we really had an emphasis going into this work was that we know that when students are coming from underserved backgrounds or minority students, that they, when they participate in high impact practice, they see even greater benefit than the majority population. So we've always had a focus that this needs to be emphasized in getting, embedded in experiences that all students are having, but in particular for underrepresented populations. And this will show you that we've done a really good job as a system to make sure that's happening. So nationally, you would not necessarily see this, but it, clearly we're doing a great job of trying to get everyone at an equal footing there with high impact practices. And then this shows you by type. So again, that first year experience, and I know many of you are engaged with that particular high impact practice. So again, I want to thank you for that. We still want to move that needle, get more students engaged in some of the other practices, because we'd like to see every student engaged in at least 3 before they complete a degree with us. And first year experience can certainly be that stepping stone. The other is over the summer, you were presented with the student employment taxonomy. I didn't get any changes since that subcouncil meeting, so we're moving forward with that taxonomy with the idea that in this next year, we'll ask campuses to think about how they might implement this reflection tool that the IO Grow program has developed into student employment opportunities on campus. Melinda, when she's doing those campus visits to do professional development, is also trying to arrange visits with your financial aid directors and federal work study coordinators to see if this can be embedded in the process for student employment with federal work study. You can see again the questions there. I presented those to you this summer. We did sign off on all the legal copyright issues with IO Grow, so we can officially use their program, their reflection tools, and all the resources that they have available. Our goal is that we would start coding for student employment in fall of 2020. So it'll be the first high impact practice that's occurring outside the classroom that we'll begin coding for. And so more direction will come to your registrars about how that will occur, but I wanted to give you all notice that this year we're really trying to work to have people start thinking about how to build student employment in meaningful ways, particularly on that reflection piece. Anybody have any questions about this particular high impact practice?
So we have an academic service scholarship. I think probably most people do. Most of those students have on-campus if it's not exactly a job, it's some sort of a service, many of which are in offices, would that fit
That
in
would
the
fit
same
this.
definition?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be federal work study per se, but that's just an example. Yeah. And then again, we promoted this with your chief academic officers. We continue to promote faculty, but just know that the system office is awarding 2 student scholarships per community college for each fiscal year for students to go and be part of the offerings that the Washington Center is providing. So we have a deadline coming up at the end of this month for the January Inside Washington. And then we've got several coming up, obviously, with the campaign and the inauguration. And we just want to give people plenty of notice. So if there's ways that that can be embedded into either courses that are being offered, or that you might have faculty who might be really interested in working with students to get them involved, we are providing those scholarships. And of course, we encourage you all to take more than 2 students if you have foundation funds and other things that you can do that. We've had several schools, Cleveland State, Motlow State, I'm trying to think who the third was, Chattanooga, who've sent large groups of students over this summer. The May offering that they had, and they had a great time, got really positive feedback. So we're hoping that other schools will now start to take advantage of this opportunity. Questions on the Washington Center? Okay. Also wanted in your slide deck, you'll get this link, but you can also go to our website. We had gotten a lot of feedback over the last couple of years about people saying we need to really start promoting this with students. They don't know what a high impact practice is and what we can do. So we did have our marketing department produce a brochure. It's available for download, and schools can customize their information on the panel, the back panel of the brochure. So if you have like a particular point of contact, you can do that. There's also a flyer that was created, and again, there's a box there that campuses can put their specific information into. And then all of the badges, like what you see in the brochure for the different high impact practices, are available for download. So what we'd like to see is that faculty start to put those badges on their syllabi, so the students start to recognize the badges and that it's a high impact practice course, potentially in catalogs. Anything that we can do to help promote this. This will go a long way as we start to look at a comprehensive learner record and identifying what a high impact practice is and how it might be visibly displayed on their transcript in the future. So that is now available. And that leads us into talking about the comprehensive learner record. So over the summer, I shared with you that we had done an RFI, and we had identified Paradigm as the company who essentially has a sole source for the work. And so we have, as of last week, signed the contract with Paradigm. Volunteer State and TCAT Shelbyville have agreed to be the pilot schools that will start using Paradigm's platform to develop an electronic warranty card. And then the warranty card, once the student receives that electronic warranty card, they'll be able to send that link to employers or others. It'll be verified as legitimate to that employer, and then they would open it up and be able to see the specific learning outcomes that are covered under that warranty. So our goal would be that by next fall, we'll have something we can demonstrate to the group so you can see how that works, that it would show how we can automate the warranty cards. So Allstate was picked because number one, they have willing people there to do the work. But number two, they also offer a large number of warranty cards at our community colleges. So it'll be a really good test case for us because they right now issue so many. And then same for TCAT Shelbyville. And so we'll be able to test the different banner environments with that, make sure that it works before we, propose that to the rest of the schools as an option for them to make that electronic. That's the first step. The second step would be we'd like to move in the direction of having an electronic diploma that would do kind of the same thing, where you click on the electronic diploma and it would have the whole transcript there. It would also list their student involvement. It would list their high impact practices that we just talked about and other learning outcomes or certifications all in one place. And so that's the future end goal for us. But we hope that in the next year, we'll have something that we can actually demonstrate how this might work to the group. There was a proposal put in your Trello board about the comprehensive student learner record. The proposal there, I'm gonna let you read through that. If you've got comments or questions, please send those to me. It gives basically the recommendations of the planning group. The planning group consisted of members not only from community colleges and TCATs, but also universities in the state to talk about how we might develop something that would be transferable between each sector of higher ed in the state of Tennessee. It has recommendations for how we would code maybe student involvement opportunities and potentially how we might include the badging piece with student engagement at different high impact practices. And so we've identified basically 5 student learning outcomes that are common among all of our community colleges and our technical colleges at this point. And our recommendation is to move forward with those 5 as the framework, and that institutions would still have the flexibility to add more if they wanted to, but that we would at least have that commonality between all of our schools, and it would be accepted by the universities upon transfer. And so University of Tennessee was represented as well as ETSU. And so they have been part of the planning as well. So this is just their recommendation list at this point. But again, would love any of your feedback on that. If you have comments, just let me know. Yeah.
Question. How many institutions are utilizing badges?
I don't know of anybody right now that's using badges.
And,
Maybe.
And is there a cadre of employers who would be willing to say badges are something that our industries use outside of maybe mechatronics, nursing? I think they use badges. But are there other industries that use badges?
So we did have,
I'm just curious.
Yeah, so we did have representatives from the Nashville Chamber and Rutherford Chamber of Commerce on the planning group, and I think their interest, the badges I think are more of an incentive for the students to like earn points and really show that they demonstrated a particular skill to earn that badge. I think from their perspective, what they got really excited about was the idea that we could have a place where specific tangible learning outcomes are listed for an employer, because the course title doesn't necessarily tell an employer very much about what the student learned. The badge part of that would be exciting to them is like showing that through multiple experiences that are building upon each other, that the student, you know, compared to other candidates, maybe has stronger skill set in a particular area. And so the idea that that would be demonstrated in some way was what they were leaning more towards being excited about, as well as the certifications being all in one place.
And so in conversations about badging with academic affairs, have faculty, have deans expressed any pushback? Have they been fully supportive?
The faculty on the committee were,
okay,
but that's a representative group. So in fairness, I think that's why we felt strongly about sharing out our proposal so that others could look at that and then give some feedback. I will say I've presented it to some faculty groups, you know, against small subsets, and I've not had any pushback when I present it. Now, I don't know what that means. It could be that I'm just the presenter and they're being polite too, right? But I will say with this piece, I had 2 of my staff go to a national conference 2 weeks ago on the Conference of Learner Record that ACRO hosted, and there are many universities there, as well as there was a huge emphasis the Department of Veterans Affairs at the federal level. And this is a great segue because I'm going to have Jonathan share some of what he heard at the national level from some of those larger entities about that's really encouraging about why we should be moving in this direction. So JB, do you want to jump in here?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So as Dr. Lemming said, we attended the conference and we were able to view several institutions that have a CLR currently. They shared with us best practices and barriers to success. Among those, some of those were starting with a small pilot program, engaging multiple stakeholders across the campuses, and the use of badges, and then considering all of the different aspects of the CLR. So I think those barriers that we saw and the other things align very well with where the system office currently is going with CLR. Also, Department of Defense was very well represented at the conference. They shared with us their vision for where CLR is going, and also their promise to engage and look at their processes and their procedures across everything to make sure that they're aligning well with schools for transfer credit, different things like that. So DoD did also share with us the MilGears website and some updates on making that information. And I have to say, I was very impressed. Heather was impressed too with that webpage that they showed And they're looking at ways that they can take mill gears and eventually incorporate and work with systems in the schools for the CLR. So that was very good information. Also, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce was there, and they also shared where they're wanting to take CLR. And from their perspective, they were looking at this being a supplement eventually to resumes, something that could be verified at the school level and that they can use. So they're very interested in partnering once all of this is in place. I think the biggest takeaway from this conference was that there are a lot of stakeholders that are very interested in this. They are all willing to get together, to talk, and to work on it, and that it's moving in the right direction. Thank you.
And the Lumina Foundation is funding the grant work that we received from ACRO for this. And I know Lumina just had a meeting I was at 2 months ago and around quality credentials. And they feel like by expressing specific learning outcomes through courses that would better align with their work, even about making sure that the credentials that students are graduating with are of high quality, it would reinforce that work. So Lumina is also pretty vested right now. So I think it's good timing for us in terms of potentially, as we have this pilot work as a demonstration, be able to secure some funding potentially too. So it wouldn't necessarily be on the system. So, yeah. So more to continue on that, but love to talk with folks. I mean, if you take this back to campus and you get questions, I mean, that's why if there's a proposal, I'd love to hear that feedback and engage. I bring Christine up to the mic to talk about the accessibility work.
Hello. So your accessibility chairs have been very busy this year and accomplishing some pretty cool things. To review the 2019 timeline that I've kind of been going over consistently since January. Accessibility chair system recommendations. This is the recommendations that I believe will probably very much pertain to informing what our 2020 timeline will be as far as what accomplishments we'd like to achieve in the next year. Advocacy Reference Guide serves as a resource for accessibility chairs in the work that they're accomplishing on their campus. We have identified all of the TCAT's accessibility contacts and included them on board. Tennessee eCampus is working on revising a training course to supplement the training courses in accessibility that many of you already have on your campuses, and also to serve as a training course for our TCATs that may not have capacity to develop their own training courses. We are working to identify national partners for reporting vendor compliance, much in the way that our ANT database works in vetting materials for faculty members to use. Our resource guide and how to audit your course and completing the course audits that are happening now. TCAT trainings, we provided a training in accessibility 101, which is what the accessibility initiative is. We're going with that. And then the library accessibility team is working on conducting audits for their websites for very specific and select few. We've also conducted, Chat State conducted an Adobe training in conjunction with an accessibility 101 training for us over the summer. There are 2 sessions, many of your institutions. The accessibility audit is underway now. Community colleges, you are auditing your program of choice in its entirety, and TCATs are auditing their top 5 courses. Those are due November 15th. I'll be compiling the information again, just disseminating it out to your campuses once that's at the end of this calendar year. And then our next meeting is December 6th. And that again is the time when we will be working on reviewing this past year and the timeline accomplishments. Some of these items are carrying on into the next year. Revising the D2L training course, Tennessee eCampus is still working on that. We're still working to identify additional partners for reporting vendor compliance, and then the library website audit. will carry over. We will also work to identify new accomplishments that we hope to obtain and work towards in the 2020 year. So if you have any suggestions, or if there's anything on your campuses accessibility-wise that you would like us to address as a system, or with our accessibility chairs, please let me know, or let your accessibility chair know, ideally within the next month, so that I can get that on the calendar and start planning for those discussions at our December 6th meeting. Any questions?
Thank you, Christine.
Michael?
Good afternoon. We'll start with MOA. So the 4 campuses listed up there to do with the methods of administration evaluation that will occur on 4 campuses this year. We're looking at conducting those on-site visits in the month of November, possibly December, depending on the availability of the campuses, so that we can make sure to take care of those federal requirements. There will be an email that goes out over the next 2 weeks. Those 4 campuses describing the process. We'll take the PDS America reports and reduce those 100 to 200 pages to about 3 pages for your campus facility folks to look at, and then we'll start that process over the next 2 weeks. Any questions on that? Okay. So with Perkins and the audit situation, and I say situation simply because it's been going on for over a year now. There was one audit that began in the fall of 2018, and that was for the Tennessee Department of Education. They are the grantee for the entire state of Tennessee. And as a subrecipient, we are then to be audited as well as part of the TDOE audit from the state comptroller. That completed in the spring of 2019, and then in just the end of September, they started up again for a second audit. So that we're currently in that. I think I'm down to 1 campus that's trying to finalize their paperwork to the state comptroller, and then over the next, hopefully by Christmas break, we'll have a sit-down conversation with the comptroller about initial findings, that then I can reach out to the campus to try to get better documentation to avoid any type of findings for that. But we work through that. I don't think this group or anybody here probably have any questions about the offset opportunity, but the campuses have the opportunity to basically get some of those funds back to them, to allocate those funds in a different manner, and have done so. And submitted that. So any questions about Perkins and that audit situation? Our data reporting, that process goes on annually about this time, October, November. That process for the TCATs is still a manual process. Hopefully this will be the last year it's automated, or it will be the last year it's not automated for the TCATs. But that process is currently going on with Chris Tingle here at TDR, reaching out to the community college IR staff, and then he will be reaching out soon to the TCATs to start that process for them. Questions on the card? Same process it's been past several years. Perkins Reserve Funds, the next 2 slides are about that. Almost every campus decided to apply for reserve funds. If your campus applied for a Perkins Reserve, you were granted those reserve funds. It was up to a maximum of $5,000 to do industry certification exams for your students. And then the next slide talks about up to $10,000 was available for your campus to do Skills USA. Just so you understand, the $10,000 that was available for Skills USA is primarily for the community colleges who hadn't started Skills USA yet, and it was for them to get started, kind of what they call Start Smart program. Go ahead and do the next slide. 4-year applications will do October 1st. So the complication for probably on your campus is that you've been doing Perkins 4 and 5 at the same time. And so that's been an additional workload on the individual who's doing Perkins, because the person who's in charge of Perkins on your campus, that is one of the lower priorities of their job description, but it is one that has now been doubled, trying to do Perkins 4 and 5 at the same time. The 4-year application process for Perkins 5 has changed the way we have to do Perkins. If you don't have it in the 4-year application process, then you can't get Perkins to that particular program. For example, in your 4-year plan or application, if you talk about you're going to, even though you may have 15 programs on your campus, you think that you're going to divide over the next 4 years to 4 different programs. If you fail to put in a 5th program that then you change your mind, they cannot receive Perkins funding. So while it sounds restrictive, the idea is that you use your program advisory committee councils and input all of their information that your campus is already collecting. It's just to put it in a central location. So I've been working with several campuses. I went on several campuses and actually helped be a part of those program advisory committee minutes, those committee meetings, and so that the minutes reflect what they need to reflect so that they can go and get Perkins funding. So it's just a tweak in the requirement of what Perkins has been in the past, but it is occurring simultaneously while they're doing the other reports and requirements of Perkins 4. So that probably won't impact anybody in this group, but you may be hearing about it. And so if there are questions, please feel free to email or call me here at Central Office, and I'll be happy to answer those questions or walk through the process with anyone that needs that assistance.
All right, it's my turn. I'm running off of limited energy because of our amazing Skills USA TLTI conference that we just had the last few days. So hopefully you'll hear from your students and advisors how great that was. So now that Skills USA is off and moving on its own, it's time to focus in on work-based learning, which is the other component of my position. And so what you can see here is a quick visual graphic about the Work-Based Learning Summit that we will be hosting November 13th here at TBR for Middle Tennessee. In West Tennessee, we'll host at the Dyersburg campus November 15th, and then in East at TCAT Knoxville on November 19th. And what we've been doing up to this point is trying to get a good pulse on where everyone is at in the work-based learning programs. Each campus does something a little bit different. They have a little bit different method for how they assess students in work-based learning. And so we've completed the high impact practice workshop last year. We completed a survey to campuses. We've taken that information to our industry sector council to get their feedback on what they would like to see coming out of work-based learning with those students. And so now it's time to take all of that information, roll it out to your work-based learning coordinators, and get their feedback on putting together a work-based learning template that can be customized by a program area and can be used across the state in a way that creates more of a synonymous way for doing work-based learning. So more information will be rolling out for that. Expect that on Monday morning to come with a registration link. And there will be really cool shirts and lunch provided. So anytime I do something, it's going to be fun. So start encouraging your work-based learning coordinators or workforce development, whoever on your campus oversees that piece, to register for that conference when that comes out on Monday. Next. Okay, so the world of Skills USA, I have to say Pellissippi. Where's Pellissippi? Are they here? On the phone, Pellissippi. I was so excited that Travis Loveday came to our TLTI with their students, and they have been blown away by Skills USA. And so slowly but surely, all of our community colleges are starting to see what cool things happen with Skills USA and how it does fill that skills gap for students. And so this year, we are expanding 2 specific sectors within Skills USA to standalone competitions. I'm very excited about both of these. The first is human services, so that's your cosmetology, your barbering, nail care aesthetics programs. We'll be hosting that at the TCAT Clarksville campus. And the cool thing, not only are we having a standalone, but now they can bring more students. So it's a sliding scale, depending on how many of their students are in the program and are registered skills members. And as a reminder, all students are paid for. Their Skills USA memberships are free because we pay for that out of our Perkins funding for post-secondary. So no excuse for them not to be members. But the more members they have, the more students they can bring. So like TCAT Memphis, she's already figured out she can bring 24 students. She fills every competition and has her models, 24 students, where used to it would have been 4. And the reason that that's such a big deal is it's not just the competition, it's the meet the employer component that goes with it. This is a huge HR event for individuals in those industries, and they look to come to these because they know the best of the best students in Tennessee are going to be at these events. The other one, I was actually at the Fire Academy this morning. This one's really evolving into a neat competition. So the Tennessee Fire Codes Academy in the big town of Belt Buckle, Tennessee, if you've never been there, I encourage you to check it out. We are hosting the first ever public safety and security competition, which will be criminal justice, crime scene investigation, firefighting, robotics, urban search and rescue, and EMT, and cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is my 6th one. And I just met with the gentlemen this morning who are from the different areas, and they are so pumped. The people that they are bringing in from TEMA and TBI, National Guard. I've got the Commissioner of Homeland Security and the Commissioner of Corrections already coming. This is going to be a huge event. If you don't come to anything, you're going to want to come to this just to see the awesomeness that's going to take place. That will be March 5th and 6th. This is a really big one for our community colleges because we've never had anyone competing in firefighting, criminal justice, crime scene, all those for post-secondary. So everyone starts out on an even playing field to compete. Same concept, the more members you have, the more students you can bring to compete. And the cool thing is they get to stay on site at the fire academy in their dorm apartments, whatever you want to call them. But it's really neat. They get the full experience. And I was told today that the fire recruiting classes will be going on. So when they're not competing, they get to go sit in on those classes, which is like really neat stuff that they're going to do. So those are two highlights coming up. And then just to kind of recap, we just finished our Tennessee Leadership Training Institute this week, and so I'm dragging just a little bit. It was fantastic. It was a combination between us and SGA, which makes for some fantastic conversations. We have SGA students saying, how do we become members of Skills USA, which is great because they had such fantastic leaders. And then Washington Leadership Institute, there was a team of us that went there in September. And the thing that they learned there is how to advocate to their legislative officials, how to talk about career and technical education and Skills USA and the importance that the Perkins funding does for them and their programs. So it's really cool to get to see them do that. And we'll have Day on the Hill in March, which is another good opportunity for your Skills USA and your SJ students to learn how to advocate and speak to their legislative officials about how that money is supporting what's going on in our campuses. So when you see that information come out, really encourage those advisors and those students to attend Day on the Hill. I think that's my last slide. Is that right? Oh, this is just to reiterate what Michael mentioned, the Start Smart grant. So in speaking with a lot of the community colleges, the biggest hurdle was how do we buy the blazers? How do we get all the materials we need to get going? And so a lot of you TCATs have been doing this so long. You have all your industry sponsors, you have your fundraisers figured out. And so we did have some Perkins Reserve money remaining. And so multiple campuses, you can see those listed. If they were inactive, like they had not had an active skills chapter in several years, or they were within their first just beginning stages of starting. This is a way to kickstart those chapters. And that's already being evident by charters have now been filed by all but one campus. I'm not going to say their name so I don't embarrass them, but we have 39 out of 40 of our campuses now have Skills USA charters. So that is amazing. And we are looking forward to seeing them participate and compete in our competitions, our leadership training, and our Meet the Employer events. That is my last slide. Thank you.
Tina, you want to come up, talk about the timeline, RFP?
All right, so, hi, Title IX RFP. So our current contract with EverFi expires at the end of this academic year. And so we are looking at completing an RFP process to look for next steps in our training for students, faculty, staff, for sexual assaults, meeting our Title IX requirements. Thank you to volunteers for our advisory board that are listed there. We have Chattanooga, Dyersburg, Nashville State, TCAT Elizabethton, Memphis, TCAT Knoxville, Volunteer State, and then we also have University ETSU represented, so they're interested in continuing on with some of this contract information. Our timeline for this is that we are hoping to get the RFP draft written and reviewed by this volunteer advisory board, so in time for us to post it in January and get the RFP posted out and advertised. Let's see, current EverFi usage for our student programs, all the community colleges, thank you very much. We've implemented, we have good student usage for the Haven programs for sexual assault for students, the faculty training. There are some campuses that have not yet implemented, but I'll be following up with individual campuses and the HR or campus contacts in that regard. Any questions about timeline RFP? Thank you very much for doing your annual reports and getting them in on time. I appreciate that.
I'll just hang out for a second there and we'll have Emma join you. Emma's our grad assistant in our office, for those of you who have not met her. She's done a fabulous job when filling in. She's coordinating tomorrow's Mindset Summit for us as well. So she's been working a lot on our homeless student work as well.
Yes, so as many of you probably know, this summer, Public Chapter 266 passed, which requires every degree granting institution to designate a homeless student liaison on campus. TBR's Office of Student Success has been maintaining a public list on our website of all of our community college homeless student liaisons, so we have that updated as a network for them to interact with each other and share resources. This summer, some members of our office met with Tennessee State McKinney-Vento coordinator Justin Singleton to discuss additional resources in Tennessee for students who are housing insecure and how best to serve them. He shared a number of helpful resources with us that I wanted to draw your attention to. So the first is the National Association for the Education of Homeless Children and Youth. They maintain a higher education website that has a number of really helpful resources, one of which is a guide for determining students' homeless status on the FAFSA. So students who are homeless can be listed as independent students for financial aid purposes, and they have a breakdown for financial aid offices to use when determining which students qualify for that status. They also have a manual that is really comprehensive for determining single point of contact models on campus. So this is really helpful to keep students from being bounced around from office to office when they are seeking answers to questions and trying to figure out what resources are available to them on their individual campuses. The second resource that is really helpful is Tennessee's Continua of Care Regions. So this is a website that draws together information about all the local entities that coordinate housing and identify funding for homeless individuals and families. The link provides a map of the regions across the state along with contact information for each housing agency and homeless coordinator. So this can be especially helpful for determining existing community resources in your local region and have contact information readily available to students who may need outside community assistance finding stable housing. Other resources that he shared are listings of nonprofit organizations across the state, maps of Tennessee Head Start agencies for any students who have children of their own and need help that can be provided by Head Start. And then we also, this summer, updated all of TBR's low-income student support campus user guides, which are available on TBR's website. Another resource that we've learned more about recently is the Trellis Company offers a student financial wellness survey. This is a free national survey exploring the connection between student finances and student success. So it asks questions of students to gauge the levels of homelessness, food insecurity, transportation insecurity, financial anxiety, debt, family obligations, and perceptions about institutional supports. It's a really comprehensive survey that asks questions that aren't asked in a lot of the other surveys that we administer. So institutions that are interested in participating can register online for free. It's a quick registration form, and then they'll send you all their information to administer the survey. And institutions that participate will receive a school level report of findings that includes comparison groups from similar sectors. So if you're community colleges, you may receive other regional community college results to compare your campus to. So this can be helpful. Campuses that have been using this survey have reported that it has helped give them a clear snapshot of what they're facing on their campus in terms of student needs, and it's helped them to determine what implementation strategies might be helpful for meeting those needs that they're not necessarily capturing or measuring any other way. On your Trello board, I've uploaded a list of all the survey questions so that you're able to see what individual questions are asked, as well as a program brochure for more information about that.
And I think Chattanooga State's going to be doing the Trellis survey in the spring.
Yes.
So that's one school that we know is going to be using that.
That is correct.
Wonderful. Another program that we're offering coming up on March 9th, we're having a professional in-service poverty training. So we're having basically a pre-conference before the Advising Academy that will feature Dr. Donna Beagle. I'm going to read a little bit of her bio really quickly. So Dr. Donna Beagle inspires and educates individuals, organizations, politicians, and entire communities with proven models to better outcomes for people in poverty. Born into a migrant labor family and married at 15, Dr. Beagle is the only member of her family who has not been incarcerated. At age 25, she earned her GED and then within 10 years received her doctorate in educational leadership. Dr. Beagle's inspiring story of moving from 28 years of homelessness to achieving a doctorate and her groundbreaking work assisting people to move out of poverty has been featured on the internet, in newspapers, and on television nationwide. She is an authentic voice from poverty who speaks, writes, and trains across the nation to break the iron cage of poverty for others through services provided by her company, Communication Across Barriers. We've had campus members who have participated in training programs, poverty immersion training programs with Dr. Beagle, who've had nothing but glowing reviews of her story and the work that she has done. And so we are offering 4 hours of time learning from Dr. Beagle. So we have a 3-hour conference and training. This will be interactive with time to develop campus plans for helping support students in poverty, followed by a lunch keynote address. There is a registration fee. It'll be $60, but the $60 gets you access to a 3-hour training, lunch, and the lunch keynote as well. Registration will be opening on January 21st, and this registration will be limited to 100 people and will be first come, first served. So we'll be sending out the registration link in January, but we want you to go ahead and save the date and know that when that link comes out, you'll want to register early to make sure you reserve a spot for yourself. And finally, one last thing that I want to mention is TBR's 21st annual food drive challenge will be starting November 1st and ending on December 10th. Campuses will compete to see who can collect the most food, and you'll report all of your numbers back to me in December. There are no prizes beyond glory, but you do get bragging rights if your campus has the most, and we will be determining those awards based on tiers, so the size of your institution will be taken into account. All proceeds of this food challenge will be donated to your campus food pantry or the local community organization of your choice. And the flyer that you can use to advertise the food challenge is available on Trello so that you can post that around your campus. At our Student Government President's Council business meeting yesterday, student government leadership has service learning requirements, and a lot of your student leaders expressed interest in being involved in the food drive, so I recommend reaching out to your student leaders across campus to see if they can get involved in this food drive challenge as well, to help support students on their campuses and in their communities. Does anyone have questions about any of homeless student liaison, poverty training, or food drive?
You can send people to the poverty training who won't necessarily be at the advising academy.
Yes. It's open to anyone from your campuses, and people from the advising academy would still need to register separately for the pre-conference. There'll be 2 separate events just on the same day.
This is not a question, but just something I want to tell you because I know you were the person pushing website, get your stuff up. Come on, Brian, get your act together. So I'm joking. But what I want you to know,
but not really.
no, it was your grad assistant harassing me. But what I want you to know is that on day 2 of class, we had a student who had not identified as homeless on the FAFSA or on the intake survey who said he found that on the website. He was moving his car between Kroger's and Walmart's in town, and we were able to put him in temporary housing with our emergency fund and get him connected to housing resources. So I just give you that one example of all those calls that you made aggravating us. Got that guy into housing, and he is still in class. So just so you know, it works on the ground.
That means a lot, and that's a reminder to everyone else to keep your websites updated.
Non-updated calls to Brian.
And so the poverty training that we're offering, every March we try to do something for like deans of students, conduct officers as like an in-service. That's what we're doing this year. So I just want to make sure that y'all are clear on that as well. So.
And then that afternoon for the conduct officers, we'll still have our typical meeting then. So that'll be pretty much a full day for those individuals.
Are you all having any conversation in your communities? Our community is doing a lot of talking. I guess the statewide network of United Ways released a report about a month ago called the Alice Report. Does that ring a bell with anybody? They had a press conference here in Nashville. You're familiar with it? Alice is an acronym that stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed, which is the working poor, basically. And so in our 2 counties served by our local United Way, 41% of our households in those 2 counties are Alice households, which means they're a hair away from being homeless, officially in poverty, all that. And they're making a real distinction to help the community understand that it's not about the federal poverty income level. It's about $5,000 or $7,000 above that puts you highly at risk and just, like an ER visit away. So you can get your hands on that report electronically for your counties. It's really enlightening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so this is just a reminder, we launched Wellvia, which is a telemedicine, including mental health, this past September. And so Dr. Lemming sends out information about promotion to your campuses, promotional materials, and how to get that the directory sent to the appropriate individual at Wellvia so that your students could be registered to utilize the counseling services and or mental health, telehealth services. Just to check in, is that working for everybody really quickly? I mean, how many of you guys have utilized or launched that information out to your campuses, Northeast? They find not cool. We've advertised it. Okay, awesome. So I'm actually, I'll have a call with Wellvia tomorrow, and we'll be monitoring to see what sort of usage we're getting from that contract.
I was going to say, are they going to send regular reports or?
You're supposed to give us usage reports.
To you all or to a campus contact person?
It's in the contract for the TVR system, and then we can send that out. Yeah.
I mean, it's a really good concept. I just wonder because the cost, how many students will.
Yeah, and so it'll be interesting to see to what degree that's a barrier. As a reminder, even to your counselors, if you can remind them that foundation funds can be utilized for this.
If your institution decides.
But that's an option for your student body. The emergency.
Is there an expected, rate of usage? For our campus, we have a mental health counselor. We do practicum students from some of our local four-year institutions that supplement. Awesome. And we also have some contractual services. So even in speaking to my counseling team, we sent the information for today and had the call about how to roll out, but we don't know the level of usage that we will need to engage this organization because of the resources that we're using. So is there any concern from a TBR?
No, I mean, we literally are just offering this as an alternative. So we have some schools that have been able to resource in that area. We have many others that haven't.
Right.
So this is particularly in rural areas of the state. So, and it's not just mental health, it's also like doctor health too, right? So if they're at home and they have like a bad cough or something, they don't know what it is, they can call and it's telemedicine too. Yeah, so it's not just mental health, it's also just doctor health too. Yeah.
One of the TCATs is asking how they can get student directory information.
So the information is there on the slide. They will pull that information and can email directly to Kelsey students.
Is that because it's
Yeah.
Yes, so for the TCATs on the call, there will be a report. There will be a report released to you Monday. So we finished that report today. It will be available in GlobalScape and sent out to all of the institutions.
Any other questions or thoughts?
I think the last thing is the last time we saw you, you were presenting for 2, and so Congratulations, and we hope you're well.
That's why I need to space out my presentation so I can get into the steps and
There you
stuff
go.
like that. Anyway, yeah.
One quick question. How long is our contract with Wellbe?
I think we did a renewable.
Yeah, so typically all of our system contracts are renewable up to 5 years, and then you have to do another RFP, but we renew on an annual basis.
This is Cherry at TCAT Crump. Did you say that that report would be available in Trello or GlobalScape?
GlobalScape's good.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Now I'm going to put some other folks on the spot to report out on the Student Identity Working Group progress. So you can see there the representatives, and we've got 3 vice presidents from this group serving on that group. And so they had a first call, and the considerations that they came up with as a group are listed on this slide. I won't read them all in the next steps, but I wanted to give them a chance to just share out maybe their reflections from that first call and what we're hoping to do, maybe to gather feedback from others and that sort of thing. So I can jump in wherever on that.
I'm still new.
That means you should go first.
That means you're the youngster in the group.
I think that first, it was a great first call. It gave us an opportunity, gave me an opportunity to hear positions by members of TBR from around the state. I think that it's a tricky subject because of where we are, the time that we're living in, but also where we are within the country. Thinking about student identity, there is a technological dimension to this. How do we represent identities within our systems? But also, how do we allow students to show up with their full personhood, right? Believing in our mission, trying to allow students the space to be who they are. And so I think that it's important for us to continue to have the conversation to also explore systems, technology, but also find ways to compromise, being considerate of our constituents. And so I think it's really important that we prepare for the next conversation, and anyone who was on the call and those who weren't, but who are interested in joining the committee, to put their initials by the recommendations from ACRO to try to move this forward. Because it seems like, and again, I'm new, it seems like it's been something that has kind of gone unaddressed and really needs some type of resolution for our students. And granted, I have no sense of how many students would actually self-disclose what their particular gender expression or identity is. But for the students who may be uncomfortable because of the time that we're living in and also where we are, it's important to represent them and create the space for them.
So thank you very much, because that is pretty much spot on. Emma and I got to meet with the students and actually discuss this at the Student Government President's Council a couple of days ago. And if I can just share some of their comments, I think that the students, at least in that body, can be very great champions for change. But they recognize also the delicacy, especially geographically. So I'm just going to run through comments that I took or noted. But the recognition and respect needs to be the norm, much in the way that Title IX is, and students are recognizing that right now. It's just not like it's very delicate and we kind of tiptoe around the topic and the subject. Someone noted that professors may refuse to use their preferred name and pronouns, but I have someone in my class who's about to drop out because they are not accepted. Another student said, my name is non-English, and they said specifically what it was, but non-English, and no one can say it, so I go by Jen. No one questions it. That's my preferred name and it is accepted. It shouldn't have to be an issue for others to use a preferred name. but for some it is, given when their preferred name varies in the perceived gender of their given or legal name. Their recommendations are to educate faculty, staff, and students, noting that you care more when you understand. Sensitivity training needs to be required and educate students, faculty, and staff on what terms mean, because there seems to be a lot of confusion there. And then train counselors in LGBTQ plus issues. And then also, we're a Southern Bible state. You don't hide in the closet, you just don't have one, period. And that's kind of how some of the students are feeling. And then perhaps starting with registration and records process with the preferred name, pronouns, and gender identity. It'd be great to not have to tell someone 10 different people your preferred name and be judged or treated differently each time. And then the students also noted that they hope that while this conversation is happening around identity, that ideally this will continue for cultural sensitivity and diversity training as well, because they see this as a jump starting point to really getting into some additional issues and barriers that are existing for their student body.
Any additions?
Well, just to say that the statements from students resonates with the conversation that we had in our meeting. So it's great to hear that we're on the right track. For my colleagues who will weigh in, I encourage that we look at that ACRO working group report where there's a taxonomy of sorts, because what we have to recognize as a system is that when we move to adopt something, it will be adopted at all of our institutions. And it's more than just changing something in a computer. That there are far-reaching implications for our institutions and concerns that we have to be aware of in terms of cultural sensitivity, in terms of what's happening inside and outside of the classroom. So please weigh in. Myself, Emily, and Mikhail are pretty much the vice presidents from community colleges. And so please advise what your interest is and where some of those implications that we might not have considered so far.
And if I could also add, along with talking about gender expression and the LGBTQ plus community and them being acknowledged across our system, something else that I mentioned that I recommended that we talk about is considering racial identity as well, because I know on one of our campuses, Smyrna, we have a growing population of students who identify as Arab or Middle Eastern. And so they're being asked to identify as white instead of as Middle Eastern or Arab on application forms. And so I imagine that if you have this student population at your institutions, it's the same. And so along with talking about gender expression, if we can also think about, okay, broadening what we mean by identity and being more inclusive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I want to encourage everyone to look at that report, the ACRO report, because it does, as Jackie said, it gives you a taxonomy that's a good, better, best set of practices. And I know when I read through it, we at least were falling in a lot of the better, which made me feel better about, after the meeting. But I want to encourage you to look at it because, just as been mentioned, it really needs to encompass more than just the LGBTQ plus community.
Right.
We need to look at racial identity of our students. One of my concerns was classroom management type training for faculty, because I have students who come and complain to me quite frequently that they have not been respected by faculty members or others or other students in the classroom based on their racial identity, based on their sexual expression, their gender expression, those kinds of things. And so it's difficult to fit that into a policy and actually have those conversations with those students. But then it's more difficult to go have those conversations with the faculty members, and some of the other students in the classrooms, because they just haven't had the proper training and they don't understand,
exactly how that affects that other person. And so we've been working on, my staff, we've been working on our own self-awareness and how that feeds into empathy for other people. And so, so I would encourage you to look at that report and see where your campus falls into either good, better, or best in those practices.
And I will even go a step further beyond even racial identity. And I know we can go on and on as our access is widened with the inception of Tennessee Promise and Reconnect. We're seeing more students with disabilities showing up in our classrooms. We have to think about classroom management relative to that population as well. So I hope that this is the beginning of a conversation.
And let me go one step further.
Okay.
Since you brought that up, and I want to put a plug in for the poverty training that Emma has organized, because I've been to 2 sessions with Dr. Beagle myself now, and I'm getting ready to go through the Beagle Speakers Institute, what she calls the Beagle Speakers Institute. And that is another portion that rolls into this student identity, because we are not on point and where we need to be dealing with and working with students who come from poverty. Because if you don't come from poverty, and it's similar to, you know, Jackie's skin color is different from mine. She has a very different experience in life than I have had. And so it's the same situation with those students who are coming out of poverty and coming into our institutions, and how we communicate with them, how we teach them, you know, how we serve them on our side of the house. I want to put a plug in for that as well within this identity group, because that is part of their identity. And so we need to be very much more on point with what we're doing with that group of students than we are.
Just to tag team it off of what you're saying, tag team off of your tag team. I think teaching, and I think you all know this, but helping educate people on how to be advocates or support groups for these populations as well, because we had one student who was very intentional in making sure that he was being supportive, but kept saying these people,
right?
And how that kind of language can be even more alienating. So I know you all know that, but
yeah, and sometimes we slip up and say it,
of
and
course.
you don't
Right.
mean anything by it.
I'm fortunate to be on the committee, so one thing that I would like to ask the committee to consider is bringing, while NASPA and ACRO are a very important part of this process, I think it might be relevant if we bring in advocacy group involved in the process that represents these students that we're talking about, because the majority of us, I'm guessing, will fall into the other categories than the ones we typically choose anyway, and so maybe having a representative group that could give that perspective and maybe give us more to think about. So we hadn't really talked about that, and we didn't talk about the first meeting, but maybe that's something that we need to do moving forward, so we have some outside representation about this process and what are proper words to utilize and not to utilize in this process. So, and then to your point about identifying in other ways, this just opens up that Pandora's box of what needs to occur, because even on the federal level, right, we don't have the identification of how the wide identification, when that was created 40 years ago or 50 years ago, that was all that we had, was applied another, basically. So it is time for us to start looking down that. And again, on the congressional side, they are looking for states to start doing this, so then they can do something at the federal level. So maybe Tennessee starts that process.
And just a reminder, the ACRO report that we're all referencing is in our July folder in Trello, just in case everybody can remember that.
You'll have a copy of this. I just sent an email out to the Financial Aid and Admissions Records group and carbon copied the Chief Student Affairs Officers. Julie's last day in the office was yesterday. The report on e-transcripts is that they're still working with the pilot teams, that testing is underway. We're looking at potentially how eVision Script Director might assist us in that work. We still have the goal of trying to go to scale this year, and that's now looking like a February timeline. I am looking looking at staffing to continue to push this project forward in the absence of having an associate vice chancellor. So we by no means are going to be dropping this project. We will continue to push forward. So I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. You also, in your Trello board, had a list of TSAC certification dates. The reason why you're getting that is that in the past, they had not been holding us accountable to specific dates. They are now, and I wanted to make sure you know that so that you can follow up with your staff so that we don't get calls and that sort of thing when those dates are not met. So you now have those TSAC certification dates for the coming year.
I did have one question about those, and I don't know if anybody knows. It says that they have those dates, but it also talks about that you don't have to do things a semester. You have to do annual program. What am I missing in that?
Say that again.
Pull it up and look at it. It says, I mean, it says that they have dates like a November 15 and a, you know, something else, but it also says that we don't have to do semester reports anymore. They want something annually. I'll find it. Go ahead.
Okay. One of the other things I know is that Julie had been talking to Steve here. I think Steve's in the back there. You want to come forward about some feedback that she'd been getting from your staff members related to training, and particularly since we are not doing the October banner, what do they call it? Tennessee Summit. There we go. How we might position ourselves differently moving forward. So, Steve, do you want to just share with the group briefly maybe some ideas that you all have for that?
Sure. First of all, thank you for allowing me to come here and see the group again. It's been quite a while since I've had an opportunity to be with you, so I've changed a little bit since then. But,
well, on behalf of all of us, Steve, welcome back, and we hope you're doing well.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. The prayers and great wishes that came my way really helped a lot. So thank you. Right now, what we did was, unfortunately, Tennessee Summer was not held this year. That's obvious. And one of the reasons was that we were just inundated with a number of different things we were trying to work on all at the same time. Obviously, Common App and e-transcripts and all of the other things that, you know, bug fixes and so on, things, new releases that are coming from Banner. So we really kind of backed off on that and thought, okay, what are we really looking at? And the most interesting piece here is that when we did surveys of the folks who attended Summit, the one thing that came out clearly was that everybody wanted hands-on training. We weren't getting that through the Summit. If anyone ever attended, the sessions that were held were more from an instructional, let me show you what we can do. Here's some great stuff that's coming along the ways. Almost in a sales kind of discussion. So now we're really getting down to the nitty-gritty of, you know, what topics do you need help with on the campuses? What training is actually required? So we've started gathering a lot of those notes. And what we're going to be doing is, starting in February, we're going to be having sessions where we can do online or in person. It really depends on the people who are attending these sessions. Geared toward registrars, geared toward faculty, geared toward whatever departments are requiring a particular set of training. Maybe somebody wants to know an awful lot about Microsoft Teams. We'd be more than happy to show folks exactly all the neat things that can be done with that package. Maybe someone wants to spend more time with OneDrive or Office 365 or know more about net logins and, you know, some of the security essentials that are actually going on right now, how we protect ourselves at home. We can do all those things, and those are the things we really want to offer everyone. So based upon the fact that we did not hold the Summit, we did have the survey information saying that people wanted that hands-on training. We're really gearing that for a full year from February all the way into November for next year of training sessions where a day and a half, 2 days, whatever people want, we're going to be able to try to satisfy and be able to schedule folks who are experts in their field to be able to present these things and not salespeople necessarily. So I think we're in a better place as far as that's concerned. The other topics that I wanted to discuss today is we are in the throes, the beginning throes of a really large project called the Community College in the Cloud. What we are doing right now is removing the banner instances from all of the community colleges into the Microsoft Azure cloud in a very secure environment. What will happen is that all releases and patches and upgrades for Oracle and for Banner will be controlled through the central office, so that when the grading comes out in a reasonable time frame, so that we can actually make sure that all the campuses are at the same basic level of software, so that the same offering is at each campus. People will be able to use Banner in the same way, no matter which campus they're actually sitting at. So that's one of the things we're really focusing in on. Today, we're working with Dyersburg. We are well along the way with them. In fact, our target date for going live with that database is November the 11th. And they're very excited about what's been going on. They're incredibly cooperative to help out with the things that they have to do on their campus in order to be able to connect and so on. So I think we're well on the way. We've got a really good project plan, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to get to a point where we can roll out one of these campuses per month. And of course, that's going to be pretty aggressive, but I think the key is that as we go along, we'll learn more and more about exactly how each college does what they do, so that it gets a little bit easier, it gets more standardized in our approach. Second part of what I wanted to talk about today is just that security. We're in the last week now of the National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We've been celebrating it here on the campus here. We've got bookmarks we've been giving people. If anyone's interested, I've got some others. I'm more than happy to distribute them for you. We've been reminding folks over and over again that security is your responsibility. There's a lot of things that we can do from a central office, but really when it comes down to security, it's unfortunately, it's yours. Whether you do it at home or here, wherever, using whatever devices, from a cell phone to a laptop to a Surface, it really doesn't matter. The criminals are getting smarter, the hackers are getting more intelligent, and they're getting cleverer and cleverer. And so we're always cautioning folks that if you're getting something through the email that you're not expecting, please don't click on it, please don't open it. If someone offers you money, it's not going to happen. There's a Nigerian prince who's looking for you to give them $1,000 so you can get 40 million. That's not going to happen. And by the way, your friend who is now in Ireland and is desperate for some money, please don't send it that way. These things don't occur. They don't exist. And again, the hackers are getting really, really good. There have been things lately where there's been bank account exchanges trying to happen. You've got to be really cautious on all of that. So we're really emphasizing security. We're really trying to control as much as we can the endpoints, the devices that are sitting on your desks right now, and make sure that they're encrypted. If they get stolen, nobody can use them. So we're doing an awful lot behind the scenes that is really meant to protect all of you. Third element here is we are in the final stages now of the RAVE alert system, automatic upload of all the TCAT data into the system. So all active faculty, staff, and students are now part of the RAVE database. And what that means is that if there's an active shooter situation or a weather-related incident at each of the campuses, we can automatically send notes out to folks at that campus to make sure that they know, don't come today and everything's closed, or this is a dangerous spot, please do not show up and come here. So that is really, again, as I say, very much automated. What I'll be doing in the next couple of weeks is working with the campus administrators to make sure that we've got alerts and lists together so that they can actually address faculty members, staff members, student members, and students in certain programs, and be able to give these particular alerts to those groups in particular, and specifically. Well, last but not least, Lucian has their eLive event. It's a 3 or 4 day event of just lots of training, not necessarily all sales talk, because what really happens is a lot of the campuses that are out there using Banner today now present things that they're doing at their campus that are kind of interesting. ways that they've been able to manipulate manner to do the things that they really want to be able to do on campuses. So it's a great event held in Orlando, Florida this year. Typically it goes from East Coast to West Coast, so this year it's in Orlando. Next year it'll probably be going back to the West Coast. But the early bird registration for that is closing on November the 1st. And if anyone is interested in more information, please don't be afraid to get in touch with me. And with that, Dr. Lemming, I think that's the end of my report.
Steve, I'll need to talk to you offline about that offer from that Prince. I may need help with the foreign government, but we can talk about that later.
All right. Thank you.
Well, I see that we have a new employee despite great protest from the chair of this council. Young lady, would you like to introduce yourself?
You just thought you were going to get away with it.
Can I get you to sign some stuff? What? No.
See, that does not surprise me at all. And you'd probably like for me to finish up a couple of projects.
I would. If you could come back for a couple of days, I really need some help. So.
Okay. Now you see. No, the formal report of the academic affairs was provided by Dr. Hollins and Dr. Barron and Dr. Dan. But Heidi, I just appreciate you giving me just a few minutes to say hello. And as of yesterday, we hosted our academic subcouncil meeting yesterday, and it was 1 week. So yesterday I was 1 week old, and I told the group that I had done no harm as of yesterday, and so I hope that's still the same a day and 1 day later. As I approached the academic subcouncil group yesterday, I sort of thought, okay, how could I describe this morning? Because for me, returning to academic affairs is home for me after spending so many years in academic affairs, because that's basically been my life. I look at Dr. Graybill because she and I started together in 1991, and we both started when we were 5 years old. So I'll go ahead and put that disclaimer. But I thought of two terms. I told the group yesterday it was like a reunion, because for many of the folks on the subcouncil, I am returning home, and I have worked with many of them across the years in varying roles. And for some yesterday, it's a new beginning and it's a new day. So today, Heidi, when I walked in this room, I look around and I see a very familiar face. Hi, Mike. How are you doing? And for some, you are new faces. And so I just look forward. I'm very honored to be here at the Board of Regents, and I'm honored, obviously, to lead academic affairs and work not only with the academic affairs team, but with everyone here as well. So Dr. Lemming, thank you for providing me this opportunity. Brian, anything else that you need?
Nothing that we should probably talk about on the record. I'll come find you off the record. How about that?
Okay. Okay, but thank you very much. But the formal reports were given by, like I said, Dr. Hollins and Dr. Barron and Dr. Dan. So,
well, we thank you, and we're glad 12/13 of us are glad you're here. 1/13 of us remains under protest that you left. So there you have it. Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Boylan, would you like to follow that?
Real quick, Brian.
Oh, yes, sir.
I found the TSAC thing, and the thing that confuses me, you've got a
certification and verification.
November 15, April 1, June 15, but then later it says, also TSAC will no longer require a signed reconciliation roster for each term. So maybe they distinguish between a reconciliation roster.
So the dated ones are certification, the annual is reconciliation, I think is the distinction there.
All right.
Hello, Amy.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm great. It's been a pleasure to sit in and listen to such rich and meaningful conversation that you guys have been having this afternoon. So I feel a little bit guilty that I'm going to now make you think about data. So apologies in advance for that. But we've been doing some work on our research team here at TDR over the last year, focusing a lot on adult student success. We got some grant money from Lumina last year to dig into some topics about adult students, and we started by looking at Tennessee Reconnect. And so I hope to take just a few minutes of your time today to share a little bit about what we've seen so far. About a month ago, we got some final data from TSAC about the first year of Reconnect that allowed us to finalize some of our research about that program in its first year. And so we're hoping to share that with you today. This was also shared with all your presidents earlier this week and with the academic affairs group yesterday. So I kind of feel like I'm on Tennessee Reconnect tour. And as part of my tour, there's a gift. So I'm going to pass around a handout to all of you that summarizes some of what you're going to see in these slides. It's a lot of information, so hopefully this handout will help you take home some key points. And as you have questions about this, feel free to let me know, but I'll start by just passing this around.
Those of you on the call, this was uploaded into the Trello board, so the slides as well as the handout are available electronically as well.
So as we get started on these slides here, you see some of the questions that we've tried to address in this research over the past year. 5 kind of guiding questions that have led us through our exploration of Tennessee Reconnect. One important note, this work focuses just on Reconnect enrollment at community colleges. It does not include TCAT Reconnect, although that's on our agenda to tackle in the months to come. But as we have thought over the last year about adult student success at community colleges across the state, these are the questions we've been thinking a lot about. First, we wanted to be able to quantify the impact that Tennessee Reconnect had on adult enrollment statewide. What did it do? Did it achieve the policy goals that it set out to achieve? And can we tell so far? We've also looked a lot using that data that TSAC provided to us about Reconnect applicants statewide. We've been able to get a better sense of who applied for Reconnect and of those applicants who ultimately enrolled at your institutions. But we also looked at those who did not enroll to try to come up with some demographic profile and trends that we can observe about the applicants who expressed interest in Reconnect but did not ultimately show up at community colleges, as well as the inverse question. Who was at community colleges and likely eligible for Reconnect but didn't even apply? Who's leaving money on the table? But those final 2 questions that you see there are the ones that have occupied most of our attention recently. We've been looking really closely at how well Reconnect students succeeded in their first year, looking at course taking patterns and outcomes for those students. And then lastly, what do we know going into the second year of Reconnect? And I know you all probably can answer that final question much better than we can because you're seeing it every day, but I will give the best information we have about the statewide picture of what the second year of Reconnect is shaping up to look like. So the first slide just puts some of this in context here, and you see this in your handout as well. And this is likely very familiar or intuitive to you, but just as a reminder, adult enrollment at community colleges had steadily declined over the last decade. It had peaked back in 2009, 2010, when nearly 40,000 adults were enrolling at Tennessee community colleges each year. That was the height of the Great Recession. As the economy improved, and as you see here on this slide, the red line representing the statewide unemployment rate, as the economy improved and that unemployment rate fell, so did adult enrollment. And so by 2017, adult enrollment had reached a low point. But in 2018, the first year of statewide Reconnect, of course, we see for the first time in a decade, adult enrollment increased, despite the fact that the economy was still very strong and unemployment was still low. So as we have been talking about Reconnect with members of the board and with legislators, we're focusing on that increase that you see in fall of 18. But how big was that increase really? And that's what this next slide helps us see. At the very bottom of this, it shows the system-wide number. So adult enrollment at community colleges increased 18% last year. From fall 17 to fall 18, we saw an 18% increase in adult headcount, and then a slightly larger increase even in adult FTE. We're, of course, here using the traditional definition of what it means to be an adult student, which is these are students aged 25 and older. So 18% increase, which to a lot of people, they weren't sure how to interpret that. Is that big? Is that enough? Did we expect Reconnect to have a bigger impact? And so as we have received that question, something we've thought a lot about is that the impact of Reconnect was not consistent statewide. In some places, the impact of Reconnect on adult enrollment was much larger. So if you look here at places like Dyersburg, Jackson, and Motlow, you see much bigger growth in adult enrollment.
At Montlow, you get this 59% increase in the adult student headcount. At other institutions, especially those that were already serving a large number of adults, growth was much more modest, or in some cases, flat. At Pellissippi, there's a special instance here where they had launched Reconnect a year prior. They saw their big jump in fall 17 with a 35% increase. But the story here is that there's not just one story. The impact differed across the state. Along those same lines, as we talk about adults, there's not just one type of adult student, as you know. And so in a lot of the data work that we're putting together about Reconnect, you may see us start to talk about adult students as 3 different groups. And so what you see here on this slide is adult enrollment over 4 years in these 3 distinct groups. Some adult students are what you see here in the red line at the bottom. Those are new enrollees, first-time freshman adult students. And in fall 18, that first year statewide Reconnect, we saw the number of adult first-time freshmen nearly double, big increase. Still the smallest group though, because most adult students had some prior post-secondary experience. Some adult students were what you see here in the middle line, kind of the blue line there. Those are what we've started calling reconnecting students. Those are students returning to higher ed after some time away, at least a semester away. They may have had prior enrollment at a TBR institution, they may have had prior enrollment somewhere else, but we saw a big influx of students in that category. So the number of adult students who were returning after some time away increased by 53%. That's an increase of nearly 3,000 students. Last but not least, there's this line at the top, that sort of green line. That's the number of adult students each fall who were already enrolled the prior semester, who were continuing students. And as you look at that green line, it had been steadily declining over time, and it actually declined still, even with Reconnect. The number of continuing adults went down a little bit in fall 18, but it declined at a slower rate than it had been before. So as we are talking about Reconnect, you may hear us say something like this. Reconnect brought in more new enrollees, first-time freshmen. It brought back nearly 3,000 people to higher ed, and it slowed the rate of decline for adult enrollment that we had seen since the Great Recession, really. But what makes studying Reconnect really fun is that Reconnect is not synonymous with adult enrollment. And a fun trivia fact, if you're looking for fun trivia facts, is that about 10% of all Reconnect students don't meet our definition of adult. About 10% of all the people who participated in Reconnect were actually under age 25. So these things aren't exactly the same. So let's talk a little bit about what we know about Reconnect itself. These numbers may seem familiar to you, or at least intuitive, but what you see here is the total number of Reconnect applicants according to that TSAC data, and then how many of them went through each next step in the process. So in the first year total, more than 34,000 people submitted a Tennessee Reconnect grant application. And again, this is just for community colleges. Of those, about 28,000 took the next step of completing the financial aid application by the end of 2018. So that's about 81% of all the people who applied. And then of those, about 15,500 or 45% of all the applicants enrolled at a community college in the fall of last year. Now, some of those 15,000 were not Reconnect eligible. In fact, somehow a surprising number of them were Tennessee Promise students who submitted both a Promise application and a Reconnect application, just cover all your bases perhaps. So some of those 15,000 didn't end up being Reconnect students. They were ineligible for a number of reasons. So that number you see in the red bar there, 13,848. That's the total number of Reconnect students who completed the application, satisfied the other eligibility requirements, and enrolled at community colleges last fall. So in all of this stuff in your handout here, when we talk about Reconnect students, we're almost always talking about that 13,800. Below that, you see how many of those students actually received Reconnect dollars. Because it is a last dollar scholarship, some of those Reconnect students, as you know, they're covered by Pell or TSKA. So only about 8,700 of them actually got Reconnect money in the fall. But again, when we talk about Reconnect students, just as we do often with Promise students, we're talking about whoever was in the program, regardless of what was actually on their bill or how their tuition was covered. So of those 13,848 Reconnect students, we've thought a lot about who they are, what do we know about them? And we'll come back to that in a minute. But briefly, I want to talk about everybody else. Who is not in that 13,848? Who applied but didn't show up at your colleges? The next slide tells us a little bit more about who those students were. So there's about 18,000 people who submitted that application but didn't enroll. Now, some of those were ineligible for various reasons, as you know. Statewide, about 2% of those applicants already had an associate's degree or higher. There were some people with PhDs who applied for Reconnect. They were ineligible, but it's a very small number. About 6% were in default on student loans, so they were ineligible. 19% did complete the financial aid application, but largely most of them were eligible. Most of them were eligible for Reconnect, completed the financial aid application, and just didn't enroll at college. And we've looked a lot at the demographic characteristics of those non-enrollees compared to the enrollees. Is there a population of students out there that we could be doing outreach to who are interested, who took that first step, but have not since enrolled? And I know you all are thinking about that same question. One thing we've observed that's of note is that of those people who applied for Reconnect but did not enroll, 57% of them had no prior post-secondary experience. Compare that to those who did enroll, only 15% of them did not have prior post-secondary experience. So the people we lost were people who were brand new to college. The people we got were those who had some prior post-secondary experience. But this is focusing on those who applied but did not enroll. The flip side of that question is who enrolled, who is at your colleges, and would have been eligible for Reconnect, but did not submit an application. Who left money on the table, perhaps? And that's what the next slide is going to show. So there were about 6,700 students across the state who we think, based on our best guess, would have been eligible for Reconnect, but did not submit an application. These are adult students who are pursuing the credentials that qualify you for Reconnect, and we see about 6,700 of them. They are demographically distinct in a lot of ways. These non-Reconnect adults were less likely to be female, more likely to be students of color, and more likely to be Pell Grant recipients. And so this makes us think about advising. Some of the academic affairs group yesterday suggested some of these students maybe were advised not to participate in Reconnect. So there may be real reasons why they were not Reconnect students, but it's important to know there's this comparison group of about 6,700 students who were adults eligible for Reconnect who did not even apply. But going back to those who were Reconnect students, our total, you remember that 13,000 group of Reconnect students who applied and completed all the requirements and enrolled last fall. The next slide shows a little bit of information about who those students were. Some of them, 15%, were brand new to college. 41% had already been enrolled the prior semester or prior year, but 44% were truly, in the spirit of the program, reconnecting, returning to college after some time away. And what you see on the right is how long they've been out. More than a third of them had been out of college for more than 6 years. So we're spending a lot of time thinking about that group. That group is an interesting group for research purposes to think about. Most of them are returning to the same college that they dropped out of. So how has the college changed? How have they changed in their time since prior enrollment? But we looked a lot at outcomes for these students in their first year. What courses did they take? Did they pass those courses? And as you know, with Reconnect requiring that adults take at least 6 credit hours, we did see a big increase in the number of adults taking at least 6 hours. So I encourage students to take more courses. And so that next slide is going to show those outcomes in the first term and first year for Reconnect students. And so if we can go to the next slide, I think Heidi and Brian are they're so enjoying all of the data that we've lost track of them. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you.
Sorry, we're solving a policy issue, Dr. Moore.
I understand, that's okay.
Yes, Reconnect, go.
Yes, Reconnect.
I read these yesterday, so I cheated, okay.
What you see here is the average number of hours attempted and earned and average GPAs for Reconnect students. Pretty much any way you slice it, every way we can think to look at it. Reconnect students took more hours and earned more hours than non-Reconnect adults and pre-Reconnect adults. But strangely, grades were worse across the board. Pass rates in courses were worse for every type of adult student in fall 18. We don't quite know why, but one thing we're looking a lot at is the method of delivery. So as you probably won't be surprised to learn, 50% of Reconnect students took at least one online course, and 1 in 5 took only online courses. Those online courses have lower pass rates system-wide than other courses, other types of courses. And the students that are most likely to take an online course are a demographically distinct group. So it's more likely to be women and more likely to be people who are returning to college after several years away. So remember those reconnecting students who are coming back. Many of them have been out for several years. They are much more likely to be taking online courses, and they are also least likely to be succeeding in those online courses. And so we're thinking a lot about what that might mean and how that might affect policy or advising going forward. You also see on here some numbers about how many of them came back the fall and spring and how many of them have already graduated. So the next slide shows some overall success metrics. Nearly 12% of Reconnect students have already graduated, but many of those were students who were close to graduation already when they began on Reconnect. And then another 50% returned this fall based on preliminary census data. So that seems pretty positive, an overall success rate of over 60% for that first Reconnect cohort. If we also look even further at adult enrollment again, the next slide shows fall 19 adult enrollment. And adult enrollment in fall 19 was actually up a little bit, which is kind of remarkable because as you may already know, enrollment system-wide at TDR community colleges is down 2% compared to this time last year, but adult enrollment is up a little bit. So all of this speaks to the impact that Reconnect has had on community colleges, and adult enrollment is up even more at some colleges. One last slide that I want to draw your attention to as we think about going into the second year of Reconnect or applications for next year's Reconnect are already open. What are we seeing about the rate of reapplication and return? Of the 12,000 Reconnect students from last fall who have not yet graduated, only half reapplied for Reconnect. And then only 43% both reapplied and enrolled at a community college this fall. So as we think about what that means for Reconnect going forward, we would love to get your thoughts on how we think about Reconnect eligibility requirements for continuing students or how to sustain the high rates of participation in Reconnect. So I know this is a lot of information and you're all eager to move on with your day, but as you have reflections and thoughts on this data, happy to answer any questions or hear what you think.
One quick question. When will you have any qualitative data on what the experience was like for Reconnect students?
That's a great question. So there's been some other agencies that have done surveys and focus groups about Reconnect. And then our team, this work is in partnership with the University of Virginia, the Nudge Lab. And the Nudge Lab is going to hope to do some qualitative work, surveys, and focus groups over the next 6 months or so to help supplement this with the experiences both of students and of faculty and staff who are engaging with Reconnect students. So more on that to come. All right.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you for your time.
That was all our East Tennessee friends.
We're just moving into the community college.
Yep. So Stacy and Sherry, we are headed into the community college portion of our agenda. If you're still online, I think if you want to disconnect at this time, you're welcome to do so. And thank you for being online. And you're welcome to hang around if you'd like to hear about relational advising from Dr. Chisholm. Where we are?
Yeah.
Yep.
Good afternoon, everybody.
No.
All right, so I'll make this quick as possible. So I just want to go over some updates for the year 2 of the proactive advising grant. And so essentially, most of you guys are familiar with what we did last year with the PD, the monthly advising calls, the D12 commitment from the point of contacts. the Advising Academy, Fall and Spring PD, all those pieces will continue. So I'll just share a few additions to the professional development for the year. All right, so this is sort of our plan moving forward. So, first want to make sure that across the board with our advising and advising related positions, there was some consistency in regards to standards across the state. We all have different advising delivery methods and structures, but I think that regardless of how we are operating our individual campuses, there are some core values and competencies that no matter where you are, they can be in place. And so the first piece is about alignment of national standards and professional advisor and advisor-related positions. And so partnering with each of your campuses, the HR department, and other appropriate folks to make sure that we create some templates for any new advising or advisor-related positions to make sure those core standards are across the board in all those positions. So success coaches, completion coaches, advisors, regardless of what you're doing, those core competencies will be in each of those advisor positions across the state. The second piece is enhancing professional development. So again, continuing all those pieces from last year. In addition to that, I'll talk a little bit later about some new partnerships with NACADA to monthly PD with Jermaine Pipkins, who is the Dean of Academic Affairs at Los Angeles Valley Community College. He's also a NACADA seasoned consultant. So partnering with him this upcoming year to monthly PD on our monthly statewide call. And after that, we'll look at the development of statewide advising onboarding programs. And then finally, once all those pieces are in place, then we can look at evaluation and assessment of advising. For the upcoming year, we'll just focus on those first two. And so again, the advisor and advisor-related job descriptions, so making sure we're looking at the NACADA framework, so core competencies, values, and standards. Again, regardless of what that position is, those pieces are in that job description in some way to make sure that we're meeting those basic necessities for that position. Secondly, the academic advising handbook and website. So we're hoping to have that finished December of this year to include the pieces on the board here. So looking at it from three perspectives, conceptually, so background, history, philosophical pieces tied to advising, why we're doing what we do, why it's important. Informational, so making sure each of your campuses individual or unique programs or delivery methods are outlined in one central space. And then finally, relational pieces. And so creating templates and best practices and best practice documents and resources for folks to really tailor their advising processes for their campus. All right, so monthly statewide advising call will be with Jermaine Pipkins, again, Dean of Academic Affairs at Los Angeles Valley Community College. We started that work with him already with the point of contacts on your campus. It's been going, I think, really, really great, and folks are enjoying it. Having more consistent PD from more than one person, so it's great to have a partner crowd doing that work. And so each month we're focusing on a different topic. Right now we're talking through an advising mission statement, most of which you guys all have, but just making sure we're working to either just look at that again and make sure that it's student friendly, the language is something that students understand, not so much what we understand. And so we're talking through that piece as well. And so that syllabus is the next piece, which will include the mission statement. It also talks through expectations for students, expectations for the advisor, just some like key basic sort of principles and making sure that each campus has that nailed down for the coming year. TAN, PD, and network opportunities. And so again, very new group. We are about to release our first quarterly sort of like newsletter for advising. We're excited about that. Again, highlighting advisor spotlights, research and resource hub for our students and for our advisors, and then a mentoring program of sorts for new advisors to partner with seasoned folks in their perspectives there. So we're excited about that. We have the advising pop-up PD happening on November 6th. So here at the Central Office, teams of 4 per campus. And so we're asking a point of contact to, of course, be there. Also another professional and or faculty advisor depending on your college setup, a faculty member, and then someone that is sort of an advising center, friend, I'll just, for lack of better words, so someone may work in advising, admissions or counseling services or financial aid, some department member or staff member that works closely with advising. So that'll be the team of 4 that we'll have here on campus. And again, Jermaine and I will lead that. focusing mostly on branding, rebranding, advising, helping folks to understand and to walk away with an advising syllabus, which again will include those mission statements, those core principles, and all those pieces in the code. And the deadline for that is actually tomorrow. I've got about 7 or 8 schools already down. A couple more will be emailing me today, so we have a full team. So. All right.
It's the Northeast team that's probably calling in from the car.
Okay. The last piece is the Advising Academy. So Emma mentioned the pre-conference that will accompany the Academy for 2020. So again, on March 9th and March 10th, last year, just wanted to get a baseline of where folks were with advising. Again, as I've been a part of different groups in the state, TASER, and just talking with other folks here as well, recognizing that, I think that we could continue doing some work to make sure folks understand those like basic foundations of why advising is important and why it's a part of not only student affairs, but academic affairs, and really integral to success for our students. So this upcoming year, we're going to pilot sort of a tiered process. And so tier 1, we focus mostly on policies and frameworks. And so that's for, I would say, new advisors, 0 to 2 or 3 years, understand the basic principles of advising and frameworks. Tier 2, we focus and may advise special populations. So maybe you advise reconnect students or so have you, folks that have a couple more years of experience under the belt. And your tier 3 for folks who have, say, supervisor experience with advising or seasoned advisors, and that will be focused mostly on advanced case studies. So hopefully have some good information there for all folks, regardless of your experience with advising. All right, so this is kind of small to read, just sort of a timeline of what we're doing for the year. The information highlighted in red are sort of the big picture deliverables that we're hoping to get. So again, by December of 2019, having our TBR system office advising handbook website up and ready to go. Having the statewide syllabus shell finished in February, so it's ready to debut at the March Advising Academy. And then making some significant progress on the advisor and advisor-related job description review by May of this year. And then again, appointed contacts are required to be on this call for the grant, but it's open to anyone, TCAT, or a community college. And so if you have folks in your team that you think should be a part that are not, here's the information here. I would happy to have you guys on the call. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Heidi has very graciously offered to allow us to read the Disability Services annual report and International Education annual report. Christina, did you want to say anything in 45 seconds or less?
No, have a wonderful evening. I get to go cuddle a baby.
Okay.
Yeah.
Heidi,
So highlights are on the slide deck you'll get for both. So, and the one school that didn't submit a crisis plan, you can figure that out by reading the report. And then there's some just information.
She looked at me and laughed. I got scared.
I didn't call the school out this time. So the other piece is because Jackie always worries about the sleeper. The SESI results, just again, it's going to be similar processes in the previous years, and we're going to do a call out to institutions about that. It'll be email communication the next couple of weeks to determine the date and time of the call, so just look for that from Michael. And last but not least, John, you've been so patient, sit in the back of the room, thank you. You can come up front if you want. We wanted to share with you a pilot that we're doing around student success technology integration at the community colleges. We have 3 schools that are part of the pilot, and they felt it was important for us to go ahead and share it with the other institutions. So Southwest, Nashville, and Chattanooga are 3 pilot schools. Our primary objective of this work is going to be to really look at how we can automate data integration with all the different communication softwares that we have, whether it's advising, two-way texting, really build a robust student success strategy that really connects Banner with all of the different platforms that everyone's using. And so we've got buckets that we're looking at, which is CRM, communication advising, and artificial intelligence or chatbots. We put in a proposal with THAC for funding. We have been told that we're going to get that funding for that work. We are trying to get a contract signed right now. And then we have the Moran Consulting Group, which has been brought in to actually serve as a consultant for the project. We would fund the consultant to basically do an analysis of all the products and platforms that every school is using in the system, identify what is probably what we're considering a gold standard of products that we would support as a system office. And so that's really why we wanted to share it with this group, because ultimately our goal would be we would have this standard set of products under each of those buckets that we would support as a system. We're not saying that you wouldn't be able to have other products, it's just that we wouldn't support it. So as there's upgrades or integration with Banner that's needed or other platforms, we're saying we would only work on the integration among those platforms. And so that's the goal with the pilot work with those three. And we would like to present to this group what that standard list of products would be. So you'd have a chance to give input on that, but we are only looking at products that are currently contracted. There would be a process as new things develop, because obviously technology is advancing all the time, where that could be brought to an advisory group to consider it being placed on that list of supported products. But right now we're only looking at what's has currently been contracted, so that we're not having to do any RFPs, and we would just build off of existing contracts if others wanted to latch on. I do that justice.
Yeah, that's perfect. Aren't you glad you sat here for hours to say that, John?
Had I not been here, who knows? And your CIOs are aware. We've been aware in our IT subcouncil meeting this week, so they'll be taking that back as well.
Jackie, anything from your perspective you feel like I need to make sure?
What you getting new? What's your new toys? We all want to know.
What are my new toys?
Yeah, they giving you toys out of the
We're
screen?
gonna get new toys.
Okay.
What I'm hopeful is that we will not have to do the workarounds that we've had to do in the past. You know, as we are speaking to vendors, there's always that magic question of, does it integrate with Banner? And if not, having to, you know, pull on our IT team to figure out how we can do the integration. And then we're doing a lot of communications plans and reports that are, again, very ad hoc and very manual. And so what we're hopeful is that this will allow some integration to happen, so that we're not using as much human capital as we are currently doing to do the communications that we're doing to help students succeed. Did I do it justice? Okay.
The hope is we do it once, and it's something that we can rinse and repeat for those that want to do that. So that's really distill it down. That's what we're trying to do.
So the timeline is that we're behind where we would like to be, so we've kind of pushed the timeline back. But we would hope that by your next meeting, we'll have an ability to talk through what this standard set of products are, so you could give feedback on that. And that they would actually start to do the integration mapping by March, where once we say this is the gold standard products, how does that all integrate? And that's what the consultant would be hired to do. Then it would be the next step of actually doing the work. But we're at least getting this first part funded right now. Okay.
Well said, John.
Nice, good service.
And I know you all have been here a long time. I know some of you have a long drive ahead. What I told Brian, you want to do it? About the meetings moving forward?
So shift to mornings, is that better? I mean, just to summarize, I think that's better for all of us. 9 or 10. I hate we lost the Far East delegation to ask.
Far East.
A 9 start or a 10 start?
Either way, for them, they're going to have to spend the night before, because they're coming 5 hours. So
if we do a 9, I might spend the night before.
Right. Well, and me too.
Right.
Sure.
So it's up
But
to
I'm
you
just
guys if you
thinking
want to do that, I guess.
for Northeast and Walters, they're
They're gonna do it.
5+ hours. So.
I think it makes better sense, because even if we don't, you know, if it's 9 or 10, it's extremely taxing for a 7-hour to 8-hour trip and a turnaround.
Yeah.
So I say 9.
Lorinda, do you have some travel policy though that impacts you about start times or something, or am I crazy?
Well, with the change of leadership, that's kind of gone to the wayside.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
So you were my biggest concern about
Thanks.
9.
I appreciate
Of the people that I knew had issues. So, I mean, my personal vote is 9. Hearing nothing else, it sounds like 9 works.
Okay, and I know TCATs aren't on the call, but I gave it a full year shot for them to have their own meeting with agenda items. So at this point, if they do, we'll put them at the end of the agenda and we'll flip it where community colleges start first.
So I'll let you give you want to talk about the meal part of those, that change?
Yeah, and I will try to see if we can fund a lunch for you all out of our budget. If not, we'll do a big break in the middle so you have time to go grab lunch. That works.
Perfect.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then the last thing, Heather has added Dr. Den's, the policy from, I don't know, many moons ago. The inter-institutional relationships and off-campus offerings, all of that is on the Trello with a link to a Google Drive with several documents in it. So you have access to that now. Comments are due back November 22nd. Anything else for the good of the order? Motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank y'all.
Nobody else was paying attention.
That works.